reports.
Slow week last week. I attended along with the mayor and several other people. We had Hope Day on Thursday. Food Casa's Light of Hope luncheon, and then that evening, Food for Hope for Food Bank in Adams County and Transitional Group. So that was it for last week.
Councilor Emmons?
Yes, I had the Historic Landmark Board on Wednesday last week. Pretty straightforward, going over the monthly tasks for the group. Included the historic tours coming up starting in June, July, August, and September. We'll have different structures and format. One will be a historical tour focusing on water and Stanley Lake. The other one will be farms, bees, pollinators, looking at Metzger Farm, Bowles House, and one other. I know I have one other, but I didn't write it down. They were going too fast. And then the other one, the third one is transportation, and then the last one is the university and the cemetery. So looking forward to those upcoming tours, and that's about it. Trying to think of all my boards that I've had. Yeah, I think that's it.
Councilor Baker? Nope. Mayor Pro Tem?
I actually last week I forgot to give an update that I did have Legacy Foundation the week before. They had their board meeting. They are finishing up a governance committee that was going over the bylaws, and I think that they were going to use the offer to have our attorney's office look over those bylaws and make sure that they are good and they match up with all the other agreements and such. So then they talked a lot about some of the fundraisers this year, and really as a group to hone in on, as well as to be able to get people to participate in the Legacy Foundation, talk about basically the value proposition of what the Legacy Foundation is about. So that was, I think that conversation is kind of a bigger conversation, and as far as what the future looks like, how do you stay true to the roots of the foundation. So I anticipate there's going to be a lot more work going on that. They are gearing up for their golf fundraiser. So if you're a golfer and you're interested in participating, or you know a business that is, please let myself or Councilor Azadi know. And we were both in attendance for that last meeting. This last week was actually relatively busy for me. I did stop by Planning Commission and was there long enough to say hi. I'm the liaison. I have not, to be honest, made it because most of the time they have things, but I told them I was going to try to make a concerted effort to at least make it for the first 5-10 minutes of their meeting prior to them hearing anything that might come to council. I know sometimes they have stuff from being their liaison before that are like variances and stuff that probably would never come to us, but so they seem to be appreciative of that. On Wednesday, I had Environmental Advisory Board, and so I did bring the feedback conversation back to them again, and the group really kind of actually did a lot of good work, I think, as far as like what they want those educational pieces to be, and a lot of the conversation was around, do they really have bandwidth? And so I think what they're landing on is they're going to pick specific. There was talk about there being sustainability clubs inside the schools. So opposed to just going into the schools and teaching the classes, the group is going to try to connect with the sustainability clubs in the schools and see if they can align and potentially even get the students from the sustainability clubs to be able to participate in what the city's doing and vice versa. So I thought that was a really good kind of in between of what they were looking at. And then as far as like the special events, they did a lot of talk around that too, and basically who's going to be available to man tables if they do events. They were looking at like our movies in the park, and I explained to them how the city is kind of trying to pare those down so there's more things in one place so you get more foot traffic. And then I gave them some ideas around and I know Paul was working on this, but they were talking about getting a draw, and I know they were talking about in the past they've done raffles and stuff. So if we could work with them, because the other part of it was I suggested maybe some topics around things that are relevant to our strategic plan, such as, you know, how do they educate people on water-wise type stuff. I think there's a lot of crossover in the conversations that council has had, and I shared some of those and let them kind of go from there. But if we could kind of help figure out how we potentially either help them with staff, if it's like a water conversation, or if there's donations with businesses, they talked about looking into like virtual or some of those groups that might do like native plants, so that they can have like themes, because the group wanted to not just go into those events not having a good idea of what they were going to talk about. And then lastly, Paul did bring these pieces that the city's doing with the sustainability. They really like these, so they're going to try to figure out how they capitalize on these through the events. So, some quick other short things from last week. Like I said, I did go to the dinner that Councilor Seymour mentioned with the Food for Hope. That was really a good event. And then on Saturday, I finished the week out with the United States Marine Corps Foundation for the memorial up in Golden. I did share on my Facebook, and I'd be happy to give it to any of you if you want to participate in that. They're basically going to redo that memorial, and they did a lot of conversation around how the memorial was originally set up. And it was set up in a way that when people were coming that way, that was what you saw. But there's been so much development, it's not really have the same effect. Not only that, but it also is, needs care. It's kind of, there's some parts of it that, probably are pretty weathered. In addition to that, though, they're going to have a veteran center. And this was pretty exciting. So the idea with it is to actually have veterans there that provide veteran services to people that need them. And I think that crosses over into a lot of things that we do. So I certainly would appreciate figuring out as a council how we could participate, but I would ask each of you to think about donating to that cause, because I think it's a good cause for people who fight for our liberty. The other cool thing about it was one of their board members is a Westminster resident who's a former Marine. There was a Gold Star spouse who was a Westminster resident that was there, that's part of the foundation, was a special guest there. So a lot of Westminster, and I had one other Westminster resident come up and just thank the city for having a presence there. So really cool stuff, and I have a lot of stuff I brought to share with you guys, and I'll try to remember to bring it next week so you can look it over.
Is that at Camp George West?
What's that?
Is the memorial at Camp George West?
I'm not sure if it's, I just know it's off of 6th in Golden, like 6th and Colfax.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. It's where everything intersects there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
It's been there, I want to say they said for 40 plus years. So, really great cause, but they have a ways to go in order to be able to fulfill, what they want to do with it. And they're doing kind of similar to ours, where like you can buy a brick, and they explain like basically you could buy a brick for them if you did 35 cents a day, as they, figure out the math. It's always a good fundraising tactic, but I think that it's obviously a group of people who deserve that. And the last thing I'd say about it is it wasn't just about remembrance. They did talk about the healing that goes on for veterans that are able to visit that. And actually the lady who heads up that foundation, she went through that similar thing as far as like losing her husband and stuff, and being able to connect other people. And they had some really good stories, and they actually had a Marine veteran who was one of the speakers as well. So definitely worth checking out. So it was busy last week. I think Friday was the only day I didn't have something last week.
Besides everything mentioned that I was at a 4-hour tour of Highway 7 because that'll be the next roadway that our 36 Coalition and the NATA Coalition will be going after. And I had where the Butterfly Pavilion was going, totally on a different corner. But so if you're Highway 7, the south part, Huron, the west part, and then, I don't know what, if it's 160th, whatever, and then it goes to Highway 7. 9,000 apartments going in there, with the Butterfly Pavilion and the other housing and school that's going in there. So lots coming on that corridor. So each member from Brighton to Boulder shared what was going on, got to go into Erie. We did some jogs to be able to see what cities are doing. With Erie, it was how they're using the highways that surround them for their retail, and then what they're doing elsewhere. Lafayette was there, then we went into Boulder, but that's the next corridor that is booming. I had not been down the whole thing, I've been in pieces, but pretty amazing. And how Boulder, if you've been to the Boulder Dinner Theater, from there to the east, how that's all changing and being rezoned. And so it's going to be an interesting few years with asking for some dollars. Because in places it's 2-lane, in places it's 3 or 4-lane, and you know, the push points. So anyway, it was a good tour. It was good to just see all that. So Councilor Azadi he had made a prior appointment over at Stanley Lake. He knew he had this meeting. He said he'd be here around 7 or whenever he gets here. So did you have anything for us tonight?
I do, Mayor.
Okay.
So, next slide, please. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem councilors, ladies and gentlemen in attendance, anybody watching online. Next slide. Wanted to provide a couple updates of things that are going on. First of all, Community Development Leadership Team updated our project meeting protocols, which now require applicants to hold in-person rather than virtual meetings. And so we will do that as developments start to come in here currently. But this does not change the May 3rd Uplands Development Project meeting, which is tomorrow, Wednesday. Staff's working with Oriad to ensure that community members can have access to the meeting and certainly make their voices heard. But that process will go into effect and as we move forward. Also at Irving Street Library and Park, the Fly Mile High Trapeze, Colorado's very first flying trapeze and aerial fitness school. They're opening up today at the Irving Street Library and Park, and so adults and children over 6 are welcome to register for the program. Certainly no prior experience required. So an interesting and exciting new and opportunity for our community. Next slide. Some Westie wins. Our communications team won an award of excellence for the police department recruitment video, and so they were honored with the award of excellence during the National Association of Government Communicators 2023 Blue Pencil and Gold Screen Awards. And that Blue Pencil and Gold Screen Awards, it's an annual international awards program that recognizes superior government communication products and those who produce them. And so I had a chance to review the police recruitment video, very, very nicely done, and so I certainly recognize and understand why they won that award. Next, another good award for the city and our contractors. So as a team, outstanding construction project implementation. So this is Public Works and the Utilities Project team and our contractor T. Lowell Construction. They won first place honors for the Big Dry Creek Interceptor sewer improvement projects at the Colorado Contractors Association Infrastructure Construction Excellence Awards event. And so this recognizes construction excellence and exemplary project coordination and communication. So 2 good wins for the community and certainly the city team. Next slide. Some things to know, Wednesday, 7 to 8:30, special permits and license board meeting. That's right here in council chambers. Parks, Rec, Libraries, and Open Space Advisory Board meeting is Thursday, May 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. That's at Westminster Hills Open Space. Neighborhood Nights begin Friday, May 5th at 6:30 to 8:30, and we're starting out at College Hill Library. And then the Spring Pottery Sale Saturday, May 6th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at City Park Rec Center. And then next Monday is a council meeting, 6:30 for start for pre-meeting right here in council chambers. Next slide. Information only items. This is, it's that time of year. The annual audit has begun, and so you've gotten a copy of the annual financial audit engagement letter and the pre-audit message on matters related to the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. Next slide. As always, want to be accessible, responsive, transparent, accountable. Please reach out and ask questions of us, notify us of deficiencies or concerns that you have around the community. You can call my office at 303-658-2006. You can email me directly at mfreitag@cityofwestminster.us. You can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, or ring our bell at Nextdoor. Next slide. And pending any questions, that's all I have. Yes.
I was just curious regarding the decision to go to in-person meetings for applicants with the community. I'm kind of curious to know, in terms of equity and trying to make meetings more available to nearby residents. Usually, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I mean, I would think that virtual would be a little more accessible and inclusive. So I'm just curious to know what the thinking was in.
We have Community Development Director Downing come forward. This was his department in action, so come on up.
Well, I understand your question. You'll recall that to try to be as accessible as possible, those neighborhood meetings are usually not in this building, or they could be in other city facilities, but we try to hold them as close to the proposed project as possible. We feel that probably facilitates better attendance from interested neighbors. So then you run into the technical issue of how do you present a virtual meeting when at some remote location. We haven't given up on that yet. We're still talking about how that might be possible, but it's just that logistical problem that we're trying to work through. What is better, to be close to the project site and therefore close to the neighbors who are interested, or be here where we could offer more easily offer a virtual component to the meeting. So more to come on that yet.
Okay.
Well, welcome your feedback.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, for people who aren't able to make it, or you could potentially record it. I mean, maybe there's some halfway, but I understand though, trying to do hybrid is just too hard for that kind of meeting. So, yeah, I've been wrestling with this too, so I
Can imagine.
I get it. Yeah, I guess maybe give us an update on the progress there, but I
We
think
will.
some level of virtual access or recording so people can catch it later might be beneficial.
Good feedback. Appreciate that.
Anything else? Council?
Tell me about the flying of the trapeze. Is that something that they came to us with and they're paying rent for the place, or?
Yeah, I honestly don't know the history on that. Does anybody in the staff attendance know how that came into being? It was scheduled before my arrival, so it's kind of, I don't know the background of how we got there. I know that I've never been anywhere that offers, trapeze lessons and how to do that. So sounds very interesting. I'm sure that, if they're satisfied with the outcome, and we are too, then it'll be back, and if not, then it won't. But I don't know the history of that, and I don't see anybody from PRNL who's here that would know the history.
Do we know if it's the same trapeze people that we watch when we're playing vintage baseball on Wolf Run? It's in their backyard.
I don't even know where that is, Mayor, so.
That we watch everybody swinging and twirling and exactly what's on there. So I
that
thought maybe it
beside-
was in their backyard.
Is that like north of 92nd?
No, it's 76th and Wolf.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was some sort of circusy thing that we had.
There's two ball fields, but if you're in the back one, you could, if the game's dull, you just look over here, cause they're always out.
Oh, maybe
learning
it
the
is on there,
trapeze.
okay. I couldn't remember what road I was going down.
Yeah.
So if the kids are out of control, you can tell them you have to take trapeze lessons.
Tempted.
But we can certainly follow up, talk to PR and get some of the background on that.
I just didn't know if we're basically paying them to provide this experience, and is it a one-time only shot?
Well, it's
One
set
day.
up all summer.
It's gonna be all summer there.
All summer
So
on
one
site.
would think there has to be, and how is the liability worked on that? One must worry about people falling.
They have big
Well,
nets.
That's an
Lot of
attorney.
ropes.
We'll follow up, Counselor.
Okay,
Okay,
presentations.
so, Mayor Pro Tem, counselors, we have 3 presentations. They're all, ones that we've been working for some time. First one will be the rodeo market, then we'll move on to municipal court, financial strategy, and we'll finish up with an update on Westminster Station. But to begin, I'll pass it over to Economic Development Director Lindsay Kimball for the presentation on the rodeo market. So, Lindsay.
Great, thank you, Mark. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and councilors. I'm Lindsay Kimball, your Economic Development Director. For some table setting, before we get into the presentation, just want to share, the last time we spoke about the rodeo market here in this room, we presented the results of the community survey. And as a result of that conversation, City Council instructed us to do 3 things to explore the feasibility of: 1, a restaurant use; 2, a vanilla shell, or that's another fancy real estate term for the renovation of a building to a minimal level for basically any user. So a blank space, a blank canvas for that. And 3, what would be the outcomes of selling the property and divesting ourselves of it. And there's been a lot of strong grassroots energy around this project. It's very important to the community. So we took a lot of time and care in doing the analysis. And Stephanie Troller, our Economic Resiliency Manager, will be sharing now the results of our analysis, the costs, the pros, the cons of each of these 3 that I described, future use scenarios for the rodeo market building, as well as some important background information. So we, again, just refresh on how we got here, and we'll end with staff recommendations. So with that, we also kindly ask that you hold your questions till the end of the presentation. And I will turn it over to Stephanie.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. It's good to be back here. Apologies in the delay. One of our contractors who we worked on to get some of the cost analysis, just after we went to under contract, had a major health issue, so it delayed the project several months. Thankful he is okay, but it did add some time to my return to you. So as Lindsay stated, we're going to do a quick overview of the history, the condition of the building, and go into those options, and then you can give me direction. So for those of you who don't know, a quick timeline: the rodeo market building was constructed about 1943. It was then operated by the Valenti family as the city of Westminster's first supermarket till the early 70s. The city acquired it in the early 2000s. We received the local historic landmark designation, where we received a grant, also received a grant from the State Historical Fund to help renovate and preserve the facade of the building and the barrel vaulted roof. It was then leased to the South Westminster Arts Group, or SWAG, and it operated there for some time until that organization really became not effective. They really kind of fell apart. I wasn't involved. I don't know all the details. And at that point is where I came into the scene, and we started the Old Westminster Pub and Tavern, as it was at the time a city strategic objective. We got almost to the end zone there with a completed ODP, complete schematics, approval from the State Historic Fund, approval from the local landmark board. And then the pandemic hit. So the project was paused, and after economic conditions were reevaluated, both the pub owners, the tavern owners, and the city agreed to mutually terminate the process. At that point, we went back to the community to see what they envisioned. We did a community survey, as Director Kimball mentioned, and now we're here tonight to kind of just share all of that with council for your direction. The property it's stable. It is not in great order, but it's solid. It's a cinder block. The planners in the room are cringing that I use cinder block. I'm sure. Sorry. It's solidly constructed. The roof is stable. It's not going anywhere. However, there are some concerns. Right now, there's no water going to the property. There was a flood. There's some cut lines in the drywall. There's some asbestos. It really does not meet code for any sort of occupancy. The property also has historic easements on it from the state historical fund, meaning we cannot touch the building, especially the vaulted ceiling, the barrel roof ceiling, and the facade without their approval. And it's also on the local landmark board, so any changes or renovations beyond standard maintenance also need this approval. This is an important point later in the analysis. So, as Lindsay mentioned, we went out and got some cost estimates for the 3 scenarios. First scenario is the restaurant. Each of these options have pros and cons and cost associated. The pros in this, and this is to develop at a mid to upper mid-level restaurant, so nothing incredibly fancy, something that's, has a grassroots feel. Excuse me. As we said, the community survey had 84% support of a restaurant. Because we have done a lot of work with the Old Westminster Pub and Tavern, there's some cost savings that we could maximize there and leverage. We have the drawings, we have the ODP. It wouldn't be a fresh start. It would be picking up where we left off, making modifications, and moving that forward. With the restaurant use as well, we're going to generate sales tax for the city, so as a revenue producer. Additionally, potentially, depending on the deal structure, if that is what use we decide to move forward with, there'd be some lease revenue from the lease as well, so we could offset some of that price tag you see there, $2.3 to $2.9 million. Also, because this property is beloved by the community and has that rich history, we really want to use it, I think, as to leverage that character, preserve that character, and drive foot traffic down to support possibly some other businesses in the area as well. The cons, we've heard this before, is the parking. There's really nowhere to park. There's some limitations to back of the
Building.
thank you, operations for any sort of use like that. There is some modifications, and as we know, with this price tag, there's some significant renovations that are needed, and they're outlined both in your attachment A. The second option is just to white envelope it, white box it. Some of the pros to that is it could provide more attraction to a variety of potential tenants. It's really hard to cost estimate for an end use you don't know. So the price you see, kind of the swing, is there could be some additional tenant improvements that are really hard to figure out without knowing what that end use could be. That said, if we just do the basic minimum, it could be completed a lot faster. Parking is still an issue. Local and historic landmark approvals still need to get that. If we were to lease it, we would lose control over the finished product. So that's something that we would need to consider as well. And like I said, because there is no known use, the numbers become a little vague because we just can't predict that far out. And the third option was the disposal of the property. We had the property appraised. It came back with appraised value of $0, which really means there's no sell value in selling it. The cost of renovations far exceeds the cost of what the property's valued. So I will just say this right now. I don't recommend moving forward with this option, as we would lose control of that historic landmark, and it would be really hard to negotiate some sort of public purchase sale agreement knowing that the property is valued at $0. So with that, given the cost of the renovations, we're looking at $2.3 million, hoping to recapture some of that revenue to make up and offset some of those costs. I do recommend that we excuse me, go out for an RFQ for a restaurateur as a try, and if that doesn't work, then we can come back to the table and start discussing other uses. But given that price tag of 2.3, I think we have an opportunity to regain some of that by seeking a restaurateur. And we could always go back and find other uses if that's not successful. It is kind of a challenging market right now. And with that, I'm gonna turn it back to you, Mayor.
Got a video.
Not on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Visuals.
That's okay. With that, I will turn it, and open it up for discussion.
Counselor Numella?
I always have questions. Thank you. So just to clarify, if for the restaurant option, we'd be landlords.
We would ideally lease the property to a user, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And assuming, since we own it, we wouldn't have to pay property taxes, so the triple net on it would be less than a typical restaurateur would have to pay in the area, right?
Ideally.
Okay. And then, of course, okay, and we'll get some type of revenue, potentially. And just to clarify, so if you were to do just a vanilla shell and the amount of time, like let's say you do find a restaurateur, and then you have to then kind of design out the space, and it's just time, it's additional time. So, however, if we go down the route of prepping this building for a restaurant, we're going to make certain moves that I think would be good overall. It would set us up for probably the most flexibility in how we use that building. Is that accurate? You know, we could always step it back and do less, but.
Well, there's actually, I would think about it a different way, Counselor. I would say if you go the restaurant route, we'd want to first do that RFQ to find an actual operator. We wouldn't start to build out any of the back of the house infrastructure, the cooktops and the refrigerators and all the industrial things that would need to go in there, and the bathrooms for a restaurant level use. Mm-hmm. So I think our first step would be to do that call for restaurateurs, and then, but I also want to add that, let's say we find someone, we get to work on it, it still takes time to prep that space, so while you're prepping it, someone's spending money to do all of that, and then the success of that restaurant, we hope it's successful, but if it's not, then we also have spent money, we've modified the interior specifically for a restaurant use. So I would say it adds value, but it also limits your future potential.
I mean, yeah, we'd have to figure out where the grease trap's gonna, like, there's a lot of site planning stuff on top of just the internal.
So the good news is with the old Westminster Pub and Tavern, most of that was done. So really, we could pick up those plans, make modifications, and then, based on this, potential end user, restaurateur, we'll call them, I don't know, something for the sake of this conversation. And then they can make the modifications that they would need to suit their kitchen, but we wouldn't have to be starting from scratch. We've already done a lot of that work, and so we could leverage that to expedite. It doesn't mean that work still wouldn't have to be done.
Okay.
But we're not starting from zero.
Yeah, that's good. I forgot about that. So, with respect to the pub and tavern, that was under contract for a while. I remember there being some pushback from the surrounding community on two counts. One was that they would have a liquor license. They were concerned about the alcohol service and some of the potential impacts that were perceived to be related to that. And then also that group wanted a coffee bar, which would compete with the coffee shop that's there. So, or that's already in, like, kind of next doorish. So I guess if we're still moving forward, how do we see that not being an issue again?
Well, I think, let me start with the coffee point first. When we had started the plans for Old Westminster Pub and Tavern, part of the coffee shop was part of their initial planning, and Creative Corner came in at the same time. So I think that's where the miscommunication was. It was always part of the plan. Because it's an untested market. There's no restaurant on 73rd, so we don't know exactly. Those particular owners felt it was important to have a diversity in revenue streams to create a kind of a 24-hour, full day service. It wasn't, and I will also clarify too, the pub and tavern wasn't designed to be like a discotheque that was going to be open late at night. You could get a beer with your dinner or a glass of wine with your dinner. It wasn't really, the thought process really wasn't, to have a big late night nightclub. They wanted close at respectable times to respect the neighborhood as well. And I think that message really didn't get conveyed to the neighborhood either.
Yeah, I just don't want us to, run into that again. And I think it's reasonable, what the intent was. So that, I just want to make sure we're aware the communication needs to happen earlier than later on that. And I'd still love to see an incubator there, so like a nonprofit. So if a restaurant can't make it, I would, just to see lots of different smaller shops being able to set up. We have a really rich cultural diversity in that area, and maybe tapping into some of the festivals and the participants in that, and just seeing I know there are a lot of nonprofits that, not a lot, but there are some really focused nonprofits that do help create opportunity for really small businesses. So I'd still push for that, but okay, thank you. That was all my questions.
Counselor Emmons?
Could you help clarify for me why we would have less control under option 2 versus 1?
If we leased it to what I mean by less control is it's hard to speculate what that end use would be. And so if we don't own it, or if we, it's more of a it's hard to speculate what that would be, and therefore we can't predict is a better way to phrase it.
Okay.
Sorry if I didn't phrase
I'm
that
seeing
correctly.
this, if we're leasing it already, wouldn't it be that similar if we're leasing it under option 1? Where we would have full control?
Yeah, I probably didn't state it as now that you're bringing that up, the way I'm seeing it in a different light now. It really is, it's just hard to predict without, as a speculative, with not knowing what that end use is. So I can't say with a straight face what that would be, because I don't know what the end use is. I don't know what the requirements of the building would be. I don't know what the tenant finishes would be. So I think that's more of, I hope that answers your question. No.
So can we work on option 1 and 2 at the same time? Meaning, can we minimally upgrade so it's in working order, but at the same time put out an RFQ so that we're not delayed in timing as far as use of the site?
I think that would present some new challenges, and the first one that comes to mind is getting the state approved state historic fund approval and the local landmark approval. So I don't think they really want us, coming back to them multiple times and changing the use. That is a concern that I've heard from the state specifically, is that they don't want to, they want to see us land on a use and then seek approval. So if we come back and change it up, I think it might cause a little confusion on them. I don't think it would give them a lot of confidence.
Okay.
I hate to jump in, but so we don't have to circle back to this specific point, because one of the things that I have advocated for, and I've heard other council members over the years, is there are certain components of this that I don't understand why they would be different. The biggest one and the biggest cost we've heard is the roof. And in my opinion, is we should have taken care of that years ago, and that shouldn't be a problem because the roof is the roof. So I was going to ask a similar question, like that's something that needs to be done to preserve the building that we've already put historic dollars into. So, I mean, is there room for some of those things? Because, and I think that's what at least that's what I get out of your question, where my mind goes, is the things that aren't gonna be any different no matter who occupies the building.
Potentially. So the roof is one of the protected items from the State Historic Fund. So because it has historic significance, they don't wanna see us punching a hole for a vent or for a hood or whatever restaurants, or a grease trap or that sort of thing. So they don't want us, they want minimal work done on the roof, and they want it to be preserved. So a lot of work was done, even to figure out how to sprinkle, fire suppression, the system, without creating the wrong loads on that roof too. So they are a little persnickety about what we do, and how often we would do that work. They would want that kind of approval over and over. So if we say, for example, and this is just, again, scenario playing for the sake of the conversation, if we white box it and we say, okay, our engineers say we need a vent here for the new HVAC system. Okay, so that's great. And again, this is speculating. And then we say, hey, historical fund, you good with that? Yeah, we're good with that. And then we come back and say, well, now we want to put a restaurant, and they want to cut a hole in the roof to vent their hood. They're gonna, they will likely question that, and we would run the risk. I can't say for sure if they would say no or not, but we would run the risk of them denying it, and then that project would stop. So it's best to have, because of that risk, I think it's best to have a pretty good indicator, a solid use of what we want, and then go ask approval. Because they don't have to approve it twice, and then we could lose that potential second use or that potential, plan B.
What would we be looking at for timeline for an RFQ process?
It depends. I think we could get an RFQ within 6 months out the door, give it some thought, talk to some of the brokers and see what's out there. I think we could probably get one out in 6 months, or 3 months.
Okay. I'm just thinking, because then that kind of, if there's no bites, then we're kind of already moving on to option 2 already.
Correct, and it'll probably take just as long to do an RFQ for design and potential build as well. So that's going to add. We could. I'm thinking. I wouldn't want to go to contract with anybody. I think we really should try the restaurant option. If there's no bites, then we can move to white box, the white envelope.
Just out of curiosity, have we been having just any kind of organic conversations just to get feelers and temperature as far as anyone
there?
Yeah.
We get occasional restaurateurs and people who are interested in the building. We haven't done a lot of research until I received direction from you tonight on this. I didn't want to get hopes up or rumor mill started, so I haven't done a ton of feelers. But we occasionally do get interest in the building, and sometimes it's for a restaurant, but not, it's mostly other uses or what's going on or what's the status.
That's all my questions for now.
Counselor Baker?
Yes, how many vacant restaurant locations do we have in Westminster now?
I couldn't speak specifically to restaurants. I could speak to retail, which is how it's usually classified, and we're under 5%. But it ebbs and flows. I would say a good average is 5%, which is not bad.
Okay, and the restaurant up there at 120th, right by the Kinko's, I don't know the exact address.
The former CB
Didn't we have some
Plots?
multiple failures with that, and how difficult was that to get a new restaurateur?
They actually sought us out, and the restaurateur, Gastamo, who has the concept, I believe we came to you this summer. He's in France right now and is trying to find a contractor, so that's where that's project, I wouldn't say stalled, it's just trying to get the right builder to work.
And wasn't there another one before him at the same location?
There was, and that project did fail because they tried to do the deal fell apart for a couple different reasons. But they had multiple different concepts in first to market, and that did fail. Not because it was tested, it just the deal fell apart on the internally between the users and the landlord, and the landlord decided to sell it.
Okay, and really before that it was
CB Pots.
CB Pots, okay. The point I'm trying to make here is it's a real difficult business, and it goes through lots of changes. And I think we gave incentive when, the spaghetti factory moved in, didn't we?
We did. It was a little bit before my time, so I couldn't speak to the details, but yes, I believe so.
No, again, to underline how difficult it is. And this location would have to be called, in my opinion, a destination location, wouldn't it? Because it doesn't have the access that 120th has, or Sheridan has, or,
Yeah, it's not without challenges, but I think any use you put into that site would also have challenges with parking and visibility from the neighborhood, and from the larger market trade area.
which gets me to the thing, so how much parking does it need?
That
I
would,
know different uses have different parking requirements.
so because, and I'm gonna look to my planning friends who just left me right now as this question came up.
Parking requirements.
Parking requirements.
The
So,
rats left the
it's okay, it's okay. So we did, when we were considering this, because it's already in the built environment, we can't make parking spots. We can't manufacture parking spots. So there was a lot in thought and consideration to, and we even did a parking study, although that would probably need to be updated because it was during the pandemic, but that's where the timing was. At the time with the old Westminster Pub and Tavern, both the planning department, the parking assessment felt that there was enough on-street parking and walkability from the neighborhood that there was enough to support the restaurant with what's existing already, and we were willing to waive some of the city was willing to waive some of those requirements because they don't exist. And that's not an uncommon theme in a lot of redevelopment. If you go to downtown Denver, if you go to any old downtowns where there's, no parking, it's just absorbed in the nearby 2-3 block radius for on-street parking and of course people walking from their homes.
But if it was, how much parking would we require? I don't know how big this building is. Was it 4,000 square foot building?
It's just under 5,000, and I will have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, but I
because
mean, don't we have a formula that if it's
We do.
retail, you
Do you
need
know?
so many parking spots for so many 100 square feet?
So for inline tenant, so if you have a multi-tenant building, it's 1 space per 300 square foot. And I believe if it's a standalone restaurant, it's 1 per 100.
So really, this would need 40 to 50 parking spaces. And these would be turning over constantly, because that's the only way you get thing, and then so many are taken up by the staff working there. So really, and that was the biggest, or one of the biggest concerns of both of the options, was where would people park? So we really don't have a way for that unless we wave our magic wands and wave the rules to benefit ourselves.
Well, we did do a study, and we felt, again, it probably needed to be revisited because it was during the pandemic. So even with that, there was enough parking within a 2-block radius that they felt they could absorb our parking ratio. So it wasn't that we would waive it, is that we would just allow another option, given that there is no existing parking with all the redevelopment that's happened there, that they didn't build parking in the 50s.
Yeah, and I'm sorry,
Oh, that's
Stephanie,
okay.
I'm sorry. If I could just jump in, so to Stephanie's point, and to the other Stephanie's point, a new construction, an inline tenant or a standalone restaurant, we would require on-site parking. So the difference here that Stephanie is talking about is that we would have that parking requirement absorbed in the on-street existing parking. So what this study that was performed found that on-street could accommodate, within an appropriate radius of the rodeo market site, it could accommodate those 40 to 50 sites.
It's just been my experience that when I've gone to events down there, we all really park in the Presbyterian's parking lot.
Yeah, can I ask a related question to this, if you don't mind?
Sure,
Councilmember
jump
Baker?
in.
So shared parking, yay, fun stuff. So one, we have the fire station, and it's a big lot in the back. 2, there is the church. 3, there's also the office building we own, down the road. Why not any of those?
There's a
That's a great
huge
point.
limousine business right next to the firehouse.
Well,
And they dig up a lot of
Yeah.
parking.
as long as, I mean, but we have a lot of asphalt on that site. And so
Yeah.
that we could be using after hours, et cetera.
So we did dig in at the time for the Old Westminster Pub and Tavern parking agreements with, potentially the fire department. Obviously, safety, getting ingress and egress was a concern. We didn't really want a bunch of people parking accidentally in front of the fire lanes. The Presbyterian Church, given that there would be alcohol consumption, wasn't really open to a parking arrangement, and that's why we looked at how to absorb. There are some potential other, at the time we didn't own the Harris Park Professional Building either, but there are some potential other parking arrangements that we could come to. We just didn't investigate it further because the project didn't move forward. The U.S. Post Office has some pretty decent
Yeah,
parking.
Yeah.
And that we explored a little bit because ironically, the Old Westminster Pub and Tavern used to own that building as well. So there was some conversations around that. They just never really came to fruition because the project wasn't able to move forward. But there is that potential. It would just need to be refreshed.
Okay, and I'm just thinking like a valet service could also, you could control for how things are parked on the lot on the fire station, for example, if it's limited.
How
All
much
great
space are
ideas.
we getting back when we get rid of the recycling back there? That's a big space and mess. It's,
I don't think I'm the person to answer that question,
it
honestly.
should- forward thinking should be part of the conversation, because I mean, it's on the corner of that lot. I don't think the fire station doesn't use it, obviously, because it's typically full of recycle and worse, so.
Yeah.
Probably something
I
we should look
think
at.
that's another great idea, another creative idea, and in these redevelopment areas, especially where you're in tight spaces, to both of your points, there are those valet arrangements made. I've seen it done all over the country in downtowns and redevelopment areas, and shared parking. Of course, the Harris Park building, that's an excellent idea. There's no one in the office after 5, so why not use it to park the cars? So I think we just have to be a little bit creative.
It's not insurmountable, I guess, would
Yeah.
be the takeaway there.
And I'm sorry, if I could also add, Councilor Baker, to your questions along the lines of the viability of a restaurant, I think that there's another important aspect why we're recommending that we go down this route and issue an RFP for a restaurateur, and that's because of the overwhelming response that we got from the survey. Controlling for just residents of Harris Park and Historic Westminster, 84% said they wanted a restaurant. So you all have been through elections. 84% in any kind of voting is phenomenal. That's almost a landslide. So we felt really compelled that we needed to honor that feedback and at least present to you. It would be our recommendation that we walk those steps, check the boxes, and make sure that we give this a strong effort and our best effort, so we can see and just find out if there is someone out there who has a great idea. We don't know what we don't know. So that's why we felt that it was important in our mind as staff to recommend that to you, because of that strong voice that we heard, particularly when adjusting for if someone is actually a Harris Park resident. So 74% of all surveyed said restaurant, 84% of Harris Park residents said that. So that's just another reason, and to your point, restaurants are very risky. They're a risky business. Think about 80% fail in the first 2 years. So it's a hard business. I just, we need to be eyes wide open about this. And Councilor Nermella, to your earlier point about maybe a nonprofit partner, maybe something else. We've also gotten inquiries from folks who want to present classes there, or maybe an arts use, or maybe something where the community can engage in that building. That's not a restaurant. But seeing that number and knowing 84% of the folks wanted this, we just felt that we had to give that our best effort.
So continuing on, I have some enormously strong objections to us competing against independent restaurateurs in the city. I do not like that idea. We're in the business of running a city, not in the business of running a restaurant. especially. Then two, I have great concerns about the location. It's a destination location, okay? I mean, yes, the residents around Harris Park would love to have a restaurant, but the reason that the rodeo market isn't there anymore is because American culture changed. What was fine in 1943 and 1953 and 1960, when you could have enough walking and traffic from the neighborhood, you could really support that market. But when everybody started driving their cars, oh, they went to destinations then. And so it's hard to reinvent this into a destination, especially if we don't have any parking. Okay, and I doubt the neighbors would expect valet parking. I mean, it doesn't seem to fit in my mind. Okay, the problems we have with the State Historic Fund is because we took $50,000 of their money, correct? And if we give their money back, then we're off the hook?
We would be with the state historic. We still have a covenant on that, so we would, the covenant would still be in place for, I believe, another 8 years
Okay, and where did that covenant come from?
as a condition of accepting those funds.
Oh, so
a
giving the money
recorded-
back
yeah.
would not terminate the covenant?
Not, I would have to dig into that. I don't believe so, or it's recorded covenant, so it's in this Adams County Assessor's Office.
Okay,
So I don't believe we could just, and I don't know if the State Historic Fund, that would be contrary to their mission, so we don't know if they would, it would have to require, it would require a pretty in-depth conversation. Their business is to preserve projects, and that's what they invested in. They may not want the $50,000 back. I don't know, I haven't had that conversation. It would require a very strategic conversation with our partners in the state.
so then you're telling me at the end of 8 years, well, the covenant, expires, and we don't have to give them their $50,000 back?
Technically, yes.
Okay. I think if you're gonna have a building and a historic building, it has to be used. But if you can't get any user to use the building, okay, and especially, the building's worth nothing. So, I certainly lead to, option 3, but I wouldn't dispose of it. I would really reduce the building, turn it into a parking lot so people can park at the park. And I'd have a scale model of the building that was there to basically remember what was there and how the history had changed. And I think we could do that for a whole lot less than $1 million. And every other option is 2 to 3 with a big question mark about parking and tenants. So that's my opinion.
Mayor Pro Tem?
One point I want to bring up, because I was here through a lot of this, is some of the, and call it miscommunication or whatever it was around the coffee shop piece was, we were doing something for this group that was gonna go in there, but we weren't doing something for another group that was going in there. And eventually, I think we got that settled. But I think that if we're gonna do anything, we need to be mindful of the other businesses that are in that area and what we're doing for them, that we are being even-handed. That's my perspective of that situation. The parking has always been a challenge, and I think there are options down there that aren't just gonna fill the need for this particular building, but need to fill a need if we really, truly are gonna stand by our word and help that become a thriving historic district. We have, in my opinion, we have opportunity even with what parking that we've put for the gardens over there. I mean, that's within walking distance of 73rd. We could increase the usability of that parking lot. I think we could better use what's behind Station 1. I think there's some other opportunities that we could revamp parking. I have to think back to when I was a younger person, not that I'm that old, but I used to deliver pizzas, and one of the places I delivered was Old Town Arvada. Old Town Arvada it was pretty sketchy when I delivered there, to be honest. And at some point, that community said, hey, we want this to be thriving again. And, they decided to put tax dollars behind that. I think we're in a situation where at some point, somebody decided to put tax dollars behind this. So what do you do with it? I think that, it's got too much historic significance for us to walk away from it, in my opinion, and from the residents I've spoken to. So, I think even if we use the building for an event center, that roof has to get repaired. That's always been one of my big beefs. I'll harp on that for a second again. And I understand the complexities around what you're saying, and that makes sense. I don't know if there's an in-between where we could say, let's future-proof it in case there's a restaurant and still fix the roof and say, here's the plans if it was. I don't know if the historic board would allow us like some flexibility with that. I mean, it's a potential. But for me, this all comes down to one thing. Not just this council, not just the last three, but before that have given expectations to that community that we are behind a historic district. If we're going to be behind that historic district, we need to start getting some ground on that, in my opinion. And I think it's not just one building. We have to look at the parking holistically for 73rd Avenue. We got to figure out how we support those businesses down there. I think there's opportunity. It's never going to be an Old Town Arvada. There's just not enough space, but there's potential for this community. And, I would argue that it's not just the folks down in historic Westminster and Bradburn. People from across the city enjoy going down there. And I think, in my opinion, it would be a loss. If I could go back in time and not put dollars behind something, an owned government building, that's probably would always be my preference, just because that's my view of government. But we've made promises along the way, and not necessarily folks sitting here, but I think that this is an opportunity for the community, and I still am on option one. Option two, I guess, is we have to decide if we can't do option one. I did want to ask when the guy that was going to do the pub left. I mean, is he totally out of the picture?
He's out of the country.
Out of the country, gone.
Yes, sir.
Is that something that you could help, or that you would if you go out to the RFP to market? A lot of this work's been done. Here's
Yeah.
the concept that was going to go in before.
Maybe talking abduction and bring him back in country or something.
I thought that was where that
He was
going to.
concerning me, yeah.
I think there's potential there. I mean, you say, it's hard for me to say $0. I understand that calculation, and I think it's important the public understands that calculation is including, because there are things that need to be done. But the right person could, say, okay, fine, I'll give you $10 for it, and they could make money off of it. I mean, it's all about, what you're doing with it and the drive you have behind making it successful, so.
No, to your point, I'm still in touch. His name is Andrew Toole. He still owns a lot of properties in the neighborhood. I think his financial situation changed after the pandemic, and he's from Ireland, and he had some family issues. So we're still in contact. I think he would be open to, if we did find a new restaurateur, open to sharing those plans and kind of talking about, through the lessons learned from the experience that we had going through that together.
Counselor Seymour?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few thoughts. I'm in favor of option one. I think, first of all, from a building standpoint, we purchased a historic building, and we have made that commitment through the processes that we've gone through to be a good steward of a historic building. And so that's where we're at, right, wrong, or indifferent. And then the other side of that is this was before I was on council, but I was all in and writing in that stage for the Old Town Pub concept, because you have to have something that is a magnet. It has to create vibrancy, it has to create a buzz, and then people will come. And so the parking, to me, was something that you have to deal with on infill. It's just, people either come or don't come because of that too. You have to decide, do you want to go to the Highland or not? Do you want to go to Tennyson Street now? And the answer is yes, because there's just, everything is packed. And we have to have that one magnet that's there. You know, there was discussion on the Old Town Pub. Oh, that was a great lease. I would have asked for more if that was my lease. You can't get something that's completely unproven off the ground. You know, 6 months incentive would be like 0, and then another 6 months of maybe $1 per square foot, because that's the only way you're going to get something started down there, and not do that. The reason on number 1, 2, and not overlapping that is if you get started on a project like that, you know, the tenant finish on that gets a little crazy, especially on a restaurant, and I have experience with that. And if we go one direction and we have to come back and retrofit any part of that, it's especially in a historic building like that, on the plumbing and the electrical, you know, we're just going to add added cost, and someone's going to walk away from that. So I see that, you know, as part of vibrancy, buzz. You know, if you have the right concept, people will come. They'll go to a little shopping center in the middle of nowhere for the right pizza, I think, too. So I'm in favor of number 1.
Counselor Zadi?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Seymour. I think number 1 is the right option. Just from all the conversations, from all input we've seen, whether there's the survey or from the people themselves, a restaurant seems to be the most popular need, and the most logical and practical need there. And I agree with the roof. I think we should fix the roof. That's probably the bare minimum we can do, right? It's important, it's critical, and it will help bring in any potential tenant if at least that big expense is not on their plate.
Explain quickly what he missed with the roof.
Okay, let me think back. So the vaulted barrel roof is one of the items that is protected by the state historic covenant. So anything that we do to the roof we have to have the state historic approval as well as the local landlord approval. So what we want to avoid is going in and getting approval for one use, say they want to punch a hole for a vent or a roof, and then change our mind and then have to go back and get additional approvals. That puts us in a little bit of a jeopardy potentially of not getting that second approval for a second change to the roof or to the facade.
Okay.
Before we start our second round, I'll ask my questions. Parking. You know, I was down there this morning, and after I delivered birthday cake, and I don't need a study. I know exactly where people can park. You can park almost 10 on the west side of the park, maybe 4 or 5 on the north side of the park before the no parking for the fire station hits. If it's after 5 Bartonelli's, you can probably do 10 in there. I don't know how many are there at the fire station along that fence line, but there's at least 10. And then we need to do something where we tore down the house or the building that's just now gravel, put a public parking space sign there so people know it's okay. And I don't know how many people can park there. And I know Landgrafs have always told us with the different things that happen on Saturdays or evenings, we're happy to use that parking lot, which has at least 10 or maybe more parking spaces. That leaves the church able to do their business, and then you can park on the street. I don't think we need another parking study. How long does it take once you need something approved by the state? How long does it take to go through it?
The state actually was a little less time consuming than I think our local landmark board. We have, as Councilor Emmons know, that actually took more time to get it scheduled. The state was really we submitted, it was more of an email. It wasn't as a formal of a process. We had a lot of conversations with the architects and the designers at the time, submitting their drawings and material list, and they were comfortable with it, asked any questions, and then provided approval via email. So it was really the case manager that provided that approval. It didn't have a formal board.
Do we have any mom and pop shops in the city that are good restaurants that maybe are having to pay high rents right now, whatever, and would like to come down here?
Possibly. Again, I haven't really done a lot of legwork around that. I wanted to have your direction, have some confidence before we started that, but certainly could research that. I could think of one or two off the top of my head.
My other questions, somebody else has asked, so I'll start with round two. Counselor Nemella?
Just real quick, I did send you an article on what is occurring over, so the former Johnson and Wales University in Denver was bought out by Urban Land Conservancy and a Denver Housing Authority, and they're doing all kinds of things, and one of which is a kitchen commissary, or commissary kitchen, sorry, and through Kitchen Network. So I sent you the article so you can read it and kind of see, but one of the things I think about is to some of the concerns that we've heard about, this is a destination and having different options when you're there, versus one restaurant. It does help to have some variety. So long story short, see your email, but also, and I sent it to Mark, but the question I have is for the RFP that we would put out, what are we asking? Are we just saying, hey, we want a restaurant, or how broad or narrow?
I think we would cast a wide net and see and have some qualifications of what we're looking for. Obviously, there's a certain type of restaurant that would go into this sort of space, right? We have a lot of lessons learned through the old Westminster Pub and Tavern. I think we would keep it wide and see what happens, and then we would go through rate it through those qualifications that we would design.
Let me just clarify. Are you just asking for a restaurant, or are you saying something in the food world?
I think anything that would generate sales tax to help offset that price would be, again, helpful to, because of the price tag associated with the renovations. I think that would be prudent. So it could, as long as there was a concept of teaching school or whatever, as long as it was generating some revenue to help bring back that, replenish that, the coffers, I think that would be probably more, that's one of the specifics I would want to put out there.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Emmons?
Can we clarify, because RFP is different than RFQ, what will we be putting out?
Yet to be determined. So it will.
Because I've heard both tonight.
Yeah, it's probably an RFP. I'm guessing. I'm looking at Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then can you clarify, it's a little confusing for me as far as the funds that we've received from the State Historic Fund, and then there was also HUD mentioned. Can you walk me through about
Sure.
what we have, what we gave back,
Yeah, it is a little confusing, and I'm going to qualify. Jody just pointed out it is an RFQ. My apologies.
Because that's
So-
what it said in here.
It did, and I just said RFP. So, again, it predated us. At one point, there was some conceptual designs with the HUD funds that we would turn this into an art center, combine it with the Grange, and create kind of an art destination. The city used $50,000 of CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, to fund that study. Because that never came to fruition, we did pay HUD back for the cost of that study. So that's that repay back, and it's an important part of our history. We didn't have that come to fruition. With the State Historic Fund, we took out we took a grant for $50,000 that helped with the minimal repairs of the roof and the facade, and with that came the covenant that I think it was a 20 total year covenant that says you can't touch anything without our approval. You can, and if you sell or dispose of it, then you also have to get all those approvals.
Okay, and the 50,000 has been used to date.
Correct.
Okay.
Of the of the State Historic Fund, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this one's a little difficult for me. I know the recommendation is, do we move forward with one or not? It is a little difficult for me to say yes to one outright because I've said on record that I don't agree with the city being a landlord and that it is difficult that, you know, we're putting ourselves in that liability position. And so, however, I understand that what we have in our concept is in our library of resources for the community, which means that we either dispose of it, we use it, or we find some other purpose for it. So I will be moving forward with my option for option 1. I would not like us to not discount option 2, because I've heard from, in talking with a resident this past weekend, there could be other options for community use. I think you even just mentioned it with potentially a teaching school. We could work with our local school districts, and the conversation was around maybe even having it as a culinary school, where it still has the teaching potential. Potentially, there could be some revenue or shared some sourcing with the school district, that we're not totally out full funding of repurposing of dollars. So I'd like to see, obviously, 3 is out for me. This is an important landmark for the city in its entirety. But I would have to say my first option at this point in time with the information I have is to move forward with 1, and then if we don't have any viable concepts for what we feel would be a good use for this for a restaurateur, my option is to go to 2 and still use it as maybe a community center purpose that could drive those partnerships and that's already established in the community. So,
Yes, sir.
And I'm speculating here, and maybe we can get the engineer involved, but isn't the problem with the roof, okay, we have to bring it up to current fire codes, period. That means a sprinkler system, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and a sprinkler system is really heavy, okay? And we have trusses that met 1943, and we're talking about dead load and live load and snow load. So isn't the problem with the roof, it's just not merely fixing it, it's that it may not be structurally sound to meet the conditions we must build today?
Well, there's two issues, I wouldn't say issues, opportunities to fix the roof. One is, right now it has the wood and then a thin layer of tar and then metal flashing over it. So it's not very sustainable from the heating, the HVAC system. So when we went through the old Westminster Pub and Tavern, we kind of went down that rabbit hole, and there is some solutions there where you could add additional insulation to help prevent that escape of heating and cooling. So it's not just the weight bearing from the sprinkle system, it's also putting it. But there was, when we went through it and through the designs, there was an engineer solution, so I don't foresee it being an issue again. It's just something that we have to be mindful in the design and has to get that approval from local and state.
So in other words, your really previous study said that we could put all that dead load and live load on it.
Correct.
The insulation, the drywall, the sprinkler system, any HVAC we're putting up there, or anything else.
Correct.
Thank you.
I don't have your ranking, what you would like to do for second, third?
I second what Councilor Emmons
Okay.
said, so 1 and 2.
So you overwhelmingly have option 1. You have option 2 next, that you're pretty overwhelming. And if we have to go to 3, I just would like to say, I would ask the neighbor, the Grange, if they want to give us $10 and let them take it over. But as we're looking at this whole thing, I do think we need to think about the Grange as our neighbor, because when we were looking at things the last time around, people were using their driveway to get back to where this place's parking is. You're gonna have to make the cut through on one side or the other for that restaurant to have its own, because with the people living on this side of the driveway with the Grange right here, cars were getting hit. And, that is not the access to the restaurant. And so I just want to make that public. I will not support that. That is theirs. This is the rodeo, and you either go here or you go over here to get into whatever you're gonna make as a parking.
Yes, ma'am, and agreed. Thank you,
Good to go? Got your direction?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
Oh, we need a quick break.
Need a break? Okay.
Train.
We're gonna have three at the end.
Like that. He would like,
And one of
Yeah.
creates no buzz.
that, if you can reach, that'd be awesome.
It'd be cool.
But I mean, if we go
You ready?
Yep.
All right.
Next up.
Okay, so next presentation is on the financing of the municipal court building. And so I'm going to pitch it over to Deputy City Manager and Finance Director and Chief Financial Officer. That's a mouthful. Larry Dorr. So Larry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Freitag. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and councilors. Once again, Larry Dorr, Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. My co-presenters tonight will be Assistant City Manager Chris Lindsay and Judge Jason Lontine. As you can see, we're here to present a financing plan for the replacement municipal court building. We would enjoy having your questions at the end of the presentation. We think that there'll be some themed questions that you can bundle together, and some will be answered as we go through our presentation. You've heard in the winter, Mr. Lindsay and his team in General Services presented this as the most acute, unaddressed capital facility need in our city. Aside from the Bowles House Museum, which was constructed in 1876, our municipal court building is the oldest operating city-owned facility in our inventory. I want to just thank the team behind me before we jump in. We've consulted with our external legal and financial advisors in producing this financing plan. We've had representatives from our city manager's office, our general services department, our city attorney's office, Judge Lontine's office, the finance department, and members of our police department who helped us turn over all possibilities related to grant funding, which you'll hear some about tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindsay and for our next slide, and we'll move forward.
Thank you, Larry. We wanted to give you a couple refresher slides since it's been a few months since we talked about the assessment that was conducted at the Westminster Municipal Court. I think many of you will recognize this photo that shows a little bit of the timeline of the municipal court facility. The earliest construction there happening in 1961. We've done numerous assessments over the last couple of years, and I wanted to highlight a couple of those that we talked about in December. First of all, around security. Security assessment found numerous security issues, including points of entry, back of house areas for staff and judges, and other conditions that don't meet best practices for staff or the public. The space, while a majority of the operations have remained the same, the physical space needs have decreased slightly as we've changed over the past couple of years to electronic filing and a shift to virtual court hearings. While some of the hearings remain virtual, space deficiencies and inefficiencies between the work groups exist, and we talked about those pretty extensively. Lastly, accessibility. There are conditions that are not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we documented those throughout the building, including a lack of fully compliant restrooms, courtrooms, stairs, circulation pathways, and facilities for disabled and custody defendants due to the absence of an elevator. So just a few of the items that we identified through that assessment. Recently, our team, including the presiding judge, the police chief, the deputy city manager, chief financial officer, our facilities team, we went to the city of North Glen to meet with their team and tour their recently constructed Justice Center. It's a multi-level facility. It utilizes elevators. It has integrated departments, and it's really a purpose-built facility around justice and public safety. On behalf of the city of Westminster, I want to thank the city of North Glen for sharing their time and their building, opening their doors for us and letting us ask quite a few questions as we toured. And I would also just say that the city of North Glen would entertain you all as visitors if you feel that that might help you in any future decisions or choices, especially as we get into design of a municipal court. I want to bring back up this specific slide that we showed you all in December of the option that presented new construction on the existing site. What we included here was a purpose-built facility with core and shell and FF&E. You're going to see in a couple of slides we continue to nail down the costs for this new construction. Since we last spoke to you and since those estimates were done last August, we've fleshed out especially a lot of site improvements on the site that accounts for a couple $1 million that you'll see as we proceed through the slides. Additionally, we're seeing cost inflation from our study, again, that was done in August of 2022, while construction, assuming we continue to move forward, construction will not begin until 2025. Additionally, we're talking about contingency as we continue to work towards full design over the coming years of a municipal court facility. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Larry.
Thank you, Chris. Our team evaluated 4 different financing options for getting this done that we believe are feasible and viable, and now it's up to you tonight to tell us if it's desirable for us to move forward in these financing options. There's one that's not on here, and that is the course that our city has been on for a number of years, and that's pay-as-you-go financing. We've accumulated $6 million toward a number that Mr. Lindsay just described to you, so it's unlikely that we would be able to accumulate enough funds in the next 10, 15, or 20 years, especially with cost escalation in construction that we're seeing, to ultimately replace the court on a pay-as-you-go basis. And it's clearly one that's well understood by you all and one that we've been working towards. So in lieu of that, we've looked at these 4 options, and we really left no stone unturned. We undertook some aggressive due diligence, and the first is in the area of public-private partnerships, or P3s. We don't know of a P3 for a judicial facility in Colorado. We did not find that one has been done. We took note of the government finance officer's caution related to hidden costs, extended liabilities, and so forth. But we plowed through that anyway and found that Howard County, Maryland has undertaken a P3 with Jacobs Engineering to finance its municipal court. We interviewed Jacobs Engineering to understand how that project was done. Jacob Engineering is a huge firm based in Dallas, Texas, $15 billion a year in revenue, and we reviewed a package from them and came to the same conclusion that when these third parties are involved, obviously they're earning money and sharing risk and so forth, and felt that it probably was not the right fit for Westminster, just in terms of cost uncertainty and involving a third party in a business that our city has been engaged in for a number of decades. So we felt that wasn't an option that we could recommend, but it is still one that we undertook. The next 2 I'll just kind of bundle together, and that is general obligation bonds and sales tax revenue bonds. In this day and age, with certificates of participation being proven, the cost of an election doesn't necessarily, it's not as appetizing. It also extends our timing. So the idea of having general obligation bonds wouldn't save the city any money. It'd probably cost a little bit more due to those extra costs. So instead, we've come to recommend in the final analysis certificates of participation. This would take advantage of our existing financing capacity, as I'll show you here on the upcoming slides. This maximizes the financial flexibility in getting the project done and all of the timing involved. This council would have the opportunity to execute certain steps in the financing and move the process forward immediately. Our city has great experience with this. You can see that our city has secured financing in 13 other offerings since 1998, so this is something that our staff team and our community clearly understand. And as I mentioned before, COPs have maintained excellent AA ratings that the city has issued, so we don't think we would achieve an even better rating through general obligation or sales tax revenue bonds. So we feel that this is the best path forward. We're not aware of any AAA rated certificates of participation in Colorado. It's just a function of the financing itself. So those are the 4, or if you want to call it pay-go, an additional option that's on the table and our recommendation. So let me add a few more details and we'll carry it forward. Chris? Mr. Lindsay described the costs for the core and shell and other improvements on the site, and I just wanted to present for visibility some of the sources and uses that you can see here, and we've added a few things. Most notably, I want to turn your attention to the idea of cost inflation, really the third or fourth line down. We think that given the 15% cost escalation that we've seen in the indexes since the past August, when these estimates were produced, that it's a good idea, given that the city might not break ground on this for some many, many months into the future after design is done, that it's a good idea for us to build in some inflation. And then some contingency would be prudent as well, just because we're dealing with a site that would involve demolition of an older building or an old building that could have some environmental remediation necessary. There may be asbestos, things like that in the existing building that would need remediation. We also know that it is in a high water table area. We have a sump in the current building. We don't know what we might get into. So we've added a few things there that may or may not be necessary, but we do that so that you can see from the cash on hand in the right column that is in the current plan, 6.1 million, plus the 36.6 million in necessary financing. If that's feasible, then we have a project that's viable if it's desired by you. So some of the sources and uses there, and happy to entertain questions on those as we get to the end. So in terms of how can the city pay for this cost, first, we've built in a few assumptions in the right box. We've said 36.6 million in financing on a 25-year schedule. We think at 4.8% interest, as our advisors have suggested to us, that lays out a payment stream of $2.5 million per year, and then how to pay for that. So first, I'll tell you what's on this general fund debt summary, and then tell you what's not on it. First, in the left columns, when you see the blue shades there, that includes our city's 2015 COPs that finance the downtown project. You also see the 2005 COPs that finance the 144th interchange, and you see the 2007 COPs that financed our public safety center across from City Hall. Those are the blue bars that accumulate under 2023 through 2025. You notice that in 2026, the blue bars drop significantly, and that's because the 144th interchange and the public safety center building are completely retired. So those facilities will be no longer pulling funds from the general fund debt service. And then we've overlaid the maroon bars that you see there that go on top of it. They do decline a little bit in the subsequent years, and that's for smaller financing for big things like fire apparatus, those pumpers and ladder trucks that we have short-term leases on. And then you see it generally levels out, and then when the 2015 COPs are paid off in 2038, the only remaining general fund debt service would be for these court replacement certificates of participation carrying forward. So that's what's here. What's not here is anything related to the utility or any of our parks, open space, and trails. So our residents authorized in 2021 debt financing, which was accomplished just this past year to create our irrigation projects and the downtown park and so forth. Those are all of those debts are in our parks, open space, and trails fund. So those are the things that are here, and hopefully the things that aren't here, and demonstrate that we have the capacity within our current debt service to take care of and finance a payment, primarily because of the payoff of those other two obligations. So with that, I'd like Judge Lontine to talk a little bit about some of the secondary funding that we hope to see in this project and some of the other due diligence that was done. Judge?
Thank you, Larry. And thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. I had a chance to jump into the world of federal grant funding over the past few months and got together, and the majority of the credit here I wanted to give to Mary J. Quish and Jerry Elliott, who are the city's grant coordinators, and we had an opportunity to work together, take a look at what opportunities might be out there now, as well as what opportunities might be out there in the future, and wanted to share some of the findings with you. But Mary and Jerry looked at nearly 2,000 pages of federal legislation and federal funding documents, trying to really sift through where there might be opportunities. That included the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Community Development Block Grant, and other funding opportunities. What we ultimately concluded is that currently there aren't very good opportunities for capital expenditures that are located in those sort of grants. Primarily, where there are opportunities for capital improvements, those grants are designated for specific communities, whether it's underserved, rural communities, things of that nature, and nothing specifically court-related. But that being said, there are grant funds available for the current years that if those programs continue, may be something that we'd be able to tap into for the court. And that includes things along the lines of water conservation, renewable energy, grants, for instance, for electrical car charging stations, things of that nature, those ancillary costs that go into building a modern infrastructure like a court. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the grants that were out there, the money had to be taken in and expended within a certain period of time. So there might be a grant, but those funds need to be spent in 2024 or 2025. So those applications for those grants really didn't overlap with the timeline that we have now. But as we continue, if council were to decide to move forward with the project, as we continue through there, we'd be able to keep our eyes open on those grants, and as those timeframes become relevant, submit those applications when they're appropriate. The other thing that Mary and Jerry were able to help educate me on was the ebb and flow of federal grants, and as that relates to changes in administration, at the federal level particularly, and what those priorities are. Currently, a lot of the funds, as I said, are for rural, underserved jurisdictions and not related necessarily to court-type infrastructure. Changes in administration, that may change depending on what the criminal justice priorities are and things of that nature. So there's always the opportunity as we go forward that the state of those grants may change. Another ancillary or another offset for potential grants relate to behavioral health and programmatic grant opportunities. So while it may not be something that can be used for infrastructure, brick and mortar, there are grant opportunities out there that could help offset the operating costs of programs, and those are areas that we've explored. We actually have a grant pending right now, an application for the wellness court and things of that nature. So there are funding opportunities out there that we're exploring and that we'll continue to explore going forward. And so a brief overview of what we looked into in terms of federal funding. And Abby, if we could go to the next slide. Another really exciting potential has to do with community partnerships with a new courthouse. And something that we were exploring was not just how the building would operate from a court perspective, but really having this blank slate if we're doing a new build. How can we think outside the box and look at how that building could be used for added services to the community that are connected to the court, but also how could this building be used to help reduce recidivism and improve outcomes for those individuals that we see in our court. And one natural relationship that came to mind was with the Community Reach Center. And currently, and for those that may or may not be familiar with Community Reach or may be watching the stream, Community Reach is a nonprofit organization that provides mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse treatment, and they have several locations in the Denver metro area. One of their primary locations is located currently right next to the courthouse in what used to be the old library, and we had an opportunity to tour that facility a couple of weeks ago with their CEO and get an idea of the operation that they have there. And currently they provide services for adults and youth, and it includes everything from providing medication for sobriety as well as mental health purposes through behavioral health counseling, mental health counseling, things of that nature. And currently, the location near the court is leased from the city, and that lease will be up July 1st of 2024. And so there's an opportunity here for potentially Community Reach to collaborate with the new court building in a way that would allow those individuals that have been sentenced to mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, things of that nature, to have those services readily available. And one thing that we do know is that one of the largest obstacles to success for individuals that are undergoing those sort of treatments is access. And if there is a natural connection between where they're coming for their court case and where they're coming for their treatment, that may be able to facilitate those connections and help those individuals improve their outcomes. A few just general statistics. Currently, our court has approximately 215 individuals on active domestic violence probation and approximately 330 individuals total that are on supervised probation. And so we weren't able to suss out the number of those individuals that have been required to take mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, but suffice it to say that a large number of those individuals, that's a part of their sentence. That's why they're on supervised probation, is to engage in those services. And so connecting those individuals to a program near the court would be beneficial in our mind. And so, as I noted, Community Reach provides that medication services, behavioral health, mental health, substance use disorder treatment. Another interesting opportunity, Community Reach currently operates a criminal justice program, and part of that is pre-sentence treatment, and that's related to bond conditions. So if someone is charged and part of the incident involved a mental health crisis, say, but a charge resulted out of that, there can be conditions of bond that require treatment on the front end, and that can be taken into consideration about whether or not this individual can be safe out in the community. And part of that is considering, are they receiving the services that they need? And those conditions can be ordered by the court at the bond stage, but the challenge that's often faced is that those individuals need to come to court, they need to go find a treatment provider, and things fall apart and they don't get those services they need at the outset. So another very enticing opportunity is to incorporate a community partnership with the new municipal court that would combine those services and make them readily available to those individuals that we serve.
Thank you, Judge. To wrap up our presentation, I'll just cover the really two things on the table, and it's somewhat of an if-then situation. And first, it's our recommendation that for financing the replacement municipal courts, that certificates of participation are utilized for debt financing of the facility. And if that's desirable to you, then we would seek your direction on exploring a partnership to include Community Reach in the replacement facility. So we have not asked for them to provide any, indication, letter of interest. We're at the very preliminary stages. We would take that to the next level and have them make an introduction and deeper orientation into their work, and then begin discussion about potential obligations and responsibilities. So to note, the cost and the financing that were presented just a moment ago assume that there will be no additional space planned for or undertaken with Community Reach. So it could change the equation just a little bit if we were to explore that. So thus far, the footprint is just for replacing the existing municipal court functions and facilities as is. So with that, I turn it back to you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and councilors. If you choose us to proceed, I'll cover the project next steps. So we're ready for your questions. Thank you.
Councilor Namella?
I feel guilty going first, so you can always look away from me. Couple of questions. So just to clarify, with Community Reach, they're currently on the site, and so we just don't have a partnership with them, we just wave to them?
I'm sorry?
Do we not already have a partnership in some way with Community Reach?
So I'll defer to Chris about what the financial relationship is, but there's no relationship between the court and Community Reach other than they accept Medicaid, and so as an organization, many of the individuals that engage in substance abuse or mental health treatment as a court requirement connect with Community Reach because it's an available option for them. But there's no formal relationship between the court and Community Reach in that way. But in terms of the city's relationship,
Absolutely. So Community Reach is a tenant of the city's. The city owns that building that they utilize on the south side of that block where the municipal court is. Thank you, Larry. And I would also just throw in that building was built at the same time as the municipal court, so similar condition there as well. So we do have a landlord-tenant relationship with them in addition to the connection of the services at the municipal court.
Okay, and then, so what's happening with the building that they're currently in, and would it not be feasible to keep them in there? I'm just trying to think of not overbuilding or just trying to, be efficient with the new building, and we already have that building. Are we planning to keep it, tear it down?
We don't have plans for that building. Moving forward with that building, their lease ends July 1st, 2024. We'd explore options, but we don't have renovation plans or anything with that building at this point in time.
So ostensibly, Community Reach could stay there if they wanted to renew?
Correct.
And if it was the city's desire to renew as well.
Right, yeah. And then, are there any, I saw a line item in there for site improvements, I'm just curious. Going back to, there's a park is it an actual park, or is it, what is?
there is a playground, and they're currently constructing pickleball courts.
I was gonna say that's a good
Where the old
location
tennis
for it,
courts that used to be.
Normally, I'd never support loss of tennis courts in a community. However, I think it's a good location for pickleball because it's the noise. So
And
is
at
that?
very north end, they have recycling that's a mess.
Oh,
It was,
yeah.
It was overflowing from the weekend.
So, given all, are we trying to make? I mean, obviously, we're doing the pickleball courts, but are we doing any other site improvements that would potentially
No, this would include demolishing the existing municipal court building and general landscaping, but nothing beyond that.
Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna keep just asking about it. So, looks like we're putting the new building over the existing parking lot, so assuming I'm trying to remember from last year. So if we demolish the existing court, we would be able to put parking there. Is there any utility in reusing the southwest portion of the site for another development or selling it off? I mean, if we're not necessarily wed to keeping that existing, keeping the building that CRC is already in, I mean, could that help us in any way finance or just go towards making some net gain on the property, like if we don't need the whole property?
I think we could certainly evaluate that going forward. I know our designers and partners who provided the study this past August really just evaluated the special purpose use of a municipal court and where it would go on the site. But certainly we could engage our planners as in a future state as to what it might become of that if Community Reach is either moved, renewed, not renewed, or if there's some other municipal purpose on site that would be of interest to the community. But we've been really focused on replacing the court facility as a very basic approach to the current problem.
Could be cool to see some supportive housing or something there, or affordable housing. So, okay, aside from that, the only other question I had, I know you looked at, it sounds like every financing source possible. God, years ago we did we were looking at C-PACE, Colorado PACE, as it essentially is a financing mechanism that is tied to the assessment on the site. and I'm trying to remember if, I know it was so long ago, we brought somebody in from CPACE with respect to looking at whether it could be utilized for a public project. So I'm sure it wouldn't do, it could be maybe some type of gap financing, or I can't imagine it would cover the whole project. And I don't know, at the time, years ago, they didn't have a big track record in new construction, but I think since then they have. So, and if it's not used for the new construction, potentially it's something we look at for the existing building that Community Reach is in, because it is, you know, it's applied towards any sustainable building. If you retrofit an existing building and you're increasing the efficiency, the energy efficiency by like 20% or something, then you can use that financing for that improvement. So just thought I'd throw that out there and see if it's useful at all for us.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, that didn't come up in our due diligence of possibilities. That wasn't mentioned by any of our financial advisors or our grant or policy folks, but we'll try to retrace any steps, and if there are any opportunities that change our recommendation, it'd be our duty to report that to the mayor and council.
Yeah, I don't think it would, you know, hugely rock the boat in terms of, I'm a supporter of the COPs. But if there's some way we could cut down on that and have some, you know, other streams.
And we also, as Judge Lontine pointed out, we hope for some programming grants going forward in the future that could offset some of the furniture and fixtures and so forth, some smaller things. And and if any new funding opportunities were to come up from the state or the federal government, we will pivot and be adaptive to any of those opportunities. Count on it.
Councilor Baker?
Yes, no one else wants questions? When did it go from $30 million to 43?
So,
in December, it was $30 to $33 million.
Yeah.
That's what we based our comparison to the $24 million, and now it's 43?
Yeah, I've got that here, Councilor Baker, thank you. You know, I think in the left column, which is our uses, if you reconcile the construction cost, if you reconcile the site improvements and soft costs, that accounts for all of the utilities, the environmental remediation, and that's water, sanitation, technology, utilities, all of the things necessary in the site improvements, all of the environmental remediation. Essentially all of the nuts and bolts, those come back to that, the high end of that, about 32.5 million. But the biggest number, to answer your question, is that 30 to 32 did not include a contingency. We're recommending that makes sense just because of the complexities of the site and interim parking and moving the staff. Those are some of the things that could come up. And then you see here, we've added cost inflation. We're not going to be bidding this project for many months into the future. That was a cost as of August 2022. Costs could go down. They'll more than likely go up. So we've added those two together, add for an additional escalation of nearly $8 million. So we think that's prudent. We wouldn't want to set forth a financing plan that wasn't viable given all market conditions. You know, I've quoted you an interest rate in here that our advisors think is feasible today, but we may not be borrowing funds for days, weeks, and months into the future. So we've been very conservative in generating those costs, but we haven't moved the general core and shell and site improvements from the original numbers that you saw in December.
I'm just disappointed that they weren't in the original ones, because we all knew about those costs then. I mean, everything we pass has a contingency in it, my goodness gracious. Okay, so I'm just really disappointed that we weren't told here what this number truly was. COPs are leases, are they not?
There are certificates of participation issued against a lease purchase or a capital lease, yes. Our city's
Right,
done 14
and so
of
that's
those.
why we use them for fire engines. Because if anything ever went bad on that, we just give them the fire engine, correct?
Sure, no different than the Public Safety Center and numerous other COPs in the,
Right.
at the city.
Well, if we used a general obligation municipal bond, which would be paid the exact same way, correct?
Could come from the same debt service sources, that's
Right,
correct.
right. How much interest rate would we pay for that?
The same,
4.8?
yeah.
I was under the impression we're gonna get 3% interest on our waterworks.
Well, no, that involves a mix of federal funding and a variety of different Colorado Department of Water Resources. I wouldn't want to confuse those sources and uses with more traditional.
No, I'm just speaking of interest rate. When I look on the municipal interest rate site, I see rates for 20, 25, and 30 years at like 3.15 and 3.2.
I don't know what sites you're looking at, Counselor, we could compare.
Just something I could find on Google.
Yeah, again,
So you're
couldn't-
saying that,
Here's what I do know, is we've asked our external independent financial advisors, Hilltop Securities, they're under contract with our city, they're in the markets all the time for borrowings just of this character. They understand the investors, they understand the right spots on the yield curve, they understand credit and collateral and the capacity of the borrower. And they have told us that that's the interest rate that they would anticipate for this particular financing.
for a COP or for a general obligation bond?
Either one,
So they're the same?
they are. They're both,
Even,
they're both,
even though there's far more risk in a COP?
they're both AA rated by S&P.
I thought you said we didn't get ratings on COPs.
I beg your pardon, I did say on the slide here, COPs have maintained an excellent AA rating since 2013. Those are Westminster COPs. I said there are no AAA COPs in the state.
Ah,
Yeah. And AA, it would be the rating for a voter-approved general obligation or sales and use tax revenue bond. This is a central purpose function and a high credit rating borrower, City of Westminster. So they would be anticipated to be the same, which is why the cost of the election is really just an unnecessary cost, frankly.
oh, we have an election coming regardless.
Well, but we pay
It
to
could be
add
put
an
right on
additional-
there.
We pay to add an additional question, to my understanding. Is
Yeah,
that-
but how much would that be? $100,000, $200,000? To add one more question on our ballot? Because we have a city ballot coming up in November.
It would be in the hundreds of thousands, I think. Yeah, the 100 or 200.
Adding one more question. Because, I mean, we're already mailing out all the ballots, and we all have to count them. All we have to do is add one more question on the ballot.
We could get back to you on the what that exact cost would be, but it would definitely be an add-on to the total project.
Right, but I think it'd be rather minimal add-on. And do we have anyone on their computer who could look up really municipal interest rates? Because I looked just like 2 weeks ago, and they were in the threes. I'm boggled by that. I'm completely boggled by that.
I'm just telling you what our external advisor has told us. I don't know what yields you're looking at. These
Okay, do you have the
indexes,
ability to look it up there?
these indexes involve a myriad different borrowers in states all across the country. They involve 10-year securities, 20-year securities, 50-year securities.
I understand all that, but I'm just boggled that there's such a huge difference in interest rate.
Well, if there's an interest on the part of the entire council, we could have our advisors describe the difference potentially in a writing between those interest rates and the interest rate that we think we can achieve in the market.
Okay, what are we gonna put up as, okay, the collateral on the COPs? Because I
thank you.
know when we did the ones for the new downtown,
Mm-hmm.
see, because the whole advantage of a COP is you don't have to go to the voters. Under Tabor, that's one of the protections of Tabor, is we allow the voters to weigh in on how much debt the city's taking on. Now, if it's a municipal enterprise like our water enterprise, we don't have to do that, because that's an enterprise. But if it's a tax-funded authority like the city and our courts, then that's why Tabor has, the voters have to allow obligation. And if we use a COP, we cut the voters out of that. We don't allow them to express their wishes on it. But we have to put up collateral. If I remember correctly, on the COPs we did at the new downtown, we put our parks up. And so in theory, if we ever defaulted the leaseholder could hold that park. Am I incorrect in that understanding?
First, I'm aware of all the things you described relative to Tabor. I've had experience with all of those things. And in addition, yes, the collateral used for those other COPs are as you described. And then finally, for this financing recommendation that we've made, the municipal court would be the collateral for the project.
So if we missed a year's payment on the COPs, they would take the court?
No different than the public safety center or those parks. We have some fire stations and we have fire apparatus, fire engines that are secured by certificates of participation, but our city has always
Yeah, but I
paid
mean, we could
its
lose
debts.
one of those with no problem. Losing our court would pose a different challenge.
Well, it might be a problem to lose some of our fire apparatus too, but that's for another discussion. But yeah, I think that describes the nature of the COPs in general, and that the court will be the collateral for the financing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
You go.
No, go ahead.
I haven't synthesized everything. My questions, I mean, I don't disagree that. I wish there was some kind of, because I feel like every project that comes forward from council's review has some kind of contingency. So it's a little disappointing that the first one didn't have a contingency built into it. I understand inflation costs. I understand a number where we're at, but if we're saying that the first number for what was provided didn't have a contingency, I feel like that may have been a miss in presentation to council. My second thought for this is, do we have any, I know it's not presented here, but it is part of what we're considering, is any thought to that building as far as what needs to be upgraded? Because my understanding from what you presented is that it's the same age as the municipal court. And that in our, some of us took you up on staff's offer to review, come in person to see the municipal court and its failures, essentially. I would presume that with the condition of this other building that Community Reach is in would have similar upgrades that would be needed. Have we thought, like, what would be really beneficial for me right now is to understand the cost benefit of how much it would be to upgrade to keep preserving this location versus starting new with this municipal court. And that's the missing piece for me right now, is understanding how much can we put into the Community Reach building to preserve it for 10, 20, 30 years, if that's the way that we're looking at going, or the city's looking at going. But then also understanding that, is that benefit to preserve, does it outweigh the cost of just building new? And maybe it's $30 million to preserve, I'm just throwing out an extreme number, $30 million to upkeep for the current building, but it's only $10 million more to build for a new community resource center. I would bet that we would do better building new and spending $10 million more to have it last 50 years instead of another 30. And so that, I think, is my missing. It's hard for me right now to give a recommendation or that you're asking of council, because now that you've added that to the table, I don't have that information to say yes or no to, as far as if it makes sense or not to move forward with building new with this municipal center. And that's just I think it's a great presentation. I understand, the value and what we need in having this community or in this municipal center, but I'm having a hard time right now. I know that's not a question. I know. I'm just throwing out my thoughts here.
If I could add, I think that's something we would seek to explore, right? We need to look at exactly how much space they would require, what kind of cost increase that would cause on the building, what do their funding streams look like, right? They have access to different funding streams that we don't have access to. So where does that come in? Is it a short-term infusion of capital dollars? Is it a long-term rent that brings down our ongoing operating costs of the building? I think that's something we would seek to explore, if you give us that authority.
If I could, Councilor Emmons, we would want to proceed with them under the auspices that Mayor and Council want to proceed with a financing to replace the municipal court building. We have to start with that, or they won't take us seriously that any of those things could be feasible and come to pass. So we need to, that first part, the if-then that I described, we need that if. Otherwise, I'm not sure we can even get into a discussion with them that they're interested in taking the time to have.
Okay, and so the recap of what you're looking for is just what is the financial option that council would like to see move forward?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
if number one up here in the left, if that's desirable to the majority of council, then we will go explore this partnership. If none of that makes sense or comes to pass, then we go back to number one and forget we ever had those conversations, okay?
Okay, thank you.
If I could, on one thing on the contingency, since I've got the floor for a moment, is any use of the contingency would require the council approval and oversight. So we would always be transparent about any of those items, but I appreciate what you had to say about the initial numbers. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
First, thank you for the presentation. Second, at the beginning of it, you said you'd enjoy our questions at the end, so are you enjoying our questions so far? With all seriousness, though.
Wordsmith.
And like I think hearing some of my colleagues talk, I think one of the challenges that you shared with us around the courthouse versus, say, community reach is how we're using it and the needs that we have. And I guess that would be very hard to know. Maybe community reach is super happy with that facility as is because, they don't have the same challenges we do. They are a great partner. I imagine that, they have the ADA challenges. I mean, that facility, I have some family members who have used it. So good partner. Glad that we have that partnership. But going down that path, we as a society have had a lot of conversation around justice in general and what that looks like and how we approach it. And so I think one of the things that the city's been smart about is, these kind of partnerships, our mental health court. So I guess my question really is, are we doing this just because they're a current partner, or is there really a good need where we should be thinking about that kind of space for partners such as Community Reach and potentially other partners? Because I think one of the things that I want to make sure that we've talked about is, that we're not in the same situation in 30 years as a city, that this is a facility that, could be reasonably rehabbed in decades ahead because we've been forward thinking enough about, what that looks like. And so I'm supportive of the what you've laid out here, but I wanted to kind of just make that part of the conversation because as you continue down the path of the mental health court and what that whole cycle looks like, I feel like there's probably other opportunities outside of just Community Reach. So, you probably don't have an answer for that tonight, but, I wanted to at least make it part of the conversation. And one big question is, obviously there's some things you got to iron out with, that partnership. But being supportive of this, and if council moves forward with it, when do you actually anticipate having an actual new courthouse that's open and functioning?
I'll just comment on that, and maybe that's part of the next steps. Council is, we're looking, in October of 2023, the lowest next activity is an architect contract approval and external bond counsel authorization to come a little bit later this year once we get a little further into all of the steps. but it could be toward the end of 2025, early 2026 before we have everybody's moved, everything is, demolished and moved over and so forth. It's a very long-term project. But I hope I got that time frame correct, and it may move just a little bit. But we would start, as you see, just in a week, asking for approval of an owner's rep contract, approval of a reimbursement resolution. I'll describe what all of those things are. But we would, after a direction tonight, we would move forward on all of the next steps. So it will be a bit.
I just want to add one item. We're looking at mid-2026 for an opening.
Okay. The only other thing that, and this is just to add to the conversation from my point of view, I am glad to hear you say that you would have to come back if it's going to end up escalating in cost, because I certainly would want us to, just like we do with anything, try to come as low as possible. And so the challenge, and I'm not saying our city does this, but we want to always be mindful as we move forward that we're always trying to get best cost, not throwing away getting, good product. But I certainly am glad to hear that is going to be the way it's handled.
One relevant point to that, Mayor Pro Tem, was our visit to North Glen, was to see the level of functionality and the finishes and the technology involved and so forth. That's kind of a bar that we're going to be looking at as we kind of move through the process. So
Did it? I have to ask, because the joke is, but I don't think it's really a joke, is that facility was built by pot money, wasn't it? Like, I know that their police department likes to make light of that, but I think that's reality. Like, they have substantial tax revenue from that, and I think that went into their funding, and that's not a source that we enjoy here in Westminster. So I don't know if that came up in your tour or not.
I was there a few hours. That was one of the few questions that we didn't ask. But
now I'm going to have to tour so I can ask, I guess.
Okay.
Councilor Seymour.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to, my recollection of that presentation is staff came to us and said, we had architects looking at this, and we got to a point where the rehab was going to be significantly more than just a build and scrape, and that the slide was, we're looking at a basis of $30 to $33 million for this. Is this something that council wants us to take a look at and put together the financing package? And this is the problem, where staff doesn't even want to bring up round numbers for fear of being excoriated when they come up with the full details. I mean, my recollection of that last meeting, and I find it interesting that I have to bring this up, is that here's the package. Do you want us to move forward with it? And then we're going to bring you the detailed numbers. And then yet we get detailed numbers with built-in contingencies, FF&E in there, and inflation projections on there. And then we decide that it's something that wasn't told the truth. I wonder why they are concerned about ever bringing us estimates. So that's just something I had to say.
So
I'm in favor of moving ahead, COPs.
Councilor Azadi.
Just want to second what Councilor Seymour just said. I recall they gave the best estimate they could and said they would come back with more numbers, so that's what they're doing today. I don't think you guys did a bad job at all. I appreciate the early look into it. And I appreciate now the more detailed version. And of course, we should move forward with this, so I'm in favor.
I'm in favor of moving forward. However, with this 42 million and the 200 million for utilities, I would really like our financial advisors to have 2 or 3 bankers on board. It's enough to go around. It makes better input and guarantees for us that we're getting a good deal. So I just throw that out, but I'm for your box. We're going on second rounds now. Councilor Novella.
So just real quick on the second recommendation in terms of following up with Community Reach, I think to Councilor Emmons' point about kind of understanding what's the cost benefit for where they, you know, if they stay or if they are added into the program of the municipal court. And also Mayor Pro Tem's thought of, is it, if not them, should we just be thinking about that holistically as a use? I would also just ask if we're evaluating kind of moving somebody out of the existing building and into our new building, that we just, again, also look at the remaining site and how we can maximize its highest and best use, and, you know, and ideally in relation to this as sort of a justice center, or, you know, building off of, you know, is there an opportunity for some type of medical rehab facility, or, you know, that, again, we can try and find some adjacencies with, and potentially still, you know, make a profit on that site as well. So I would just ask that we look at holistically the site in that decision.
Thank you.
Counselor Emmons?
Just quick question is, I'm assuming that if we get an interest rate, we can go back and potentially look 5-10 years down the road for a better interest rate, for refinancing. Is that a possibility with COPS?
Absolutely, our
Okay.
cities refund, I think all of our outstanding COPs have been refunded at one time or another, so yeah.
Okay.
We've done several times.
Okay, so for a potential 4.8, we could be in a better economic position, and as a nation could potentially have lower.
By the same token, there's some urgency to get going, because it could be 7.8, you know, in a year from now or two, so.
Okay.
But absolutely, we would leave open the opportunity to refund, refinance.
Okay, perfect. And then just wanted to, Counselor Seymour, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't think there's any reason why we can't question for a person who takes notes and who sees I have 24 to 29 million written down from the last conversation, and then it came into play that the new construction would be 30 to 33 million. And that this was just a general cost to get us started. I understand all that, but when we have staff say that in a question to a response for a counselor that it did not include a contingency, but this one does, there's room for question as far as why the first one didn't have a contingency. So, while I appreciate where you're coming from and how it's challenging to bring specific numbers, because there are some of us, me included, I will own it, that look specifically at the numbers, and it can be challenging for staff. So I appreciate you know, you're bringing general costs. You did say that you don't have a real design, that there's no engineering done, and it's hard to really understand those finite details. But I think that with council, there's room for that negotiation process of how you came to where you're presenting to council. So that's where I'm coming from. To answer back to the recommendation of use of COPs, I've been part of projects with COPs. It makes sense for this to be a COP type of project, and I'm in favor of looking at a partnership for community reach, but also tapping into Mayor Pro Tem's thought as, if not community reach, are there other avenues that could potentially help programmatically with helping our residents and those that go through our municipal court. So
We've got more than a majority telling you to do box number 1.
Okay.
Plus.
We'll do one, and then we're gonna do exploring a partnership. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Mayor, thank you. And we're going to bring up our next group of presenters, and so this is an update on Westminster Station. And I can't wait for the video. I was already leaning forward, but I can't wait for the video.
You knew it was
so-
coming.
Yep, it's exciting, all right, so
Popcorns?
go ahead and get the group swapped on.
You ate yours.
Yes.
We'll turn it over to Economic Development Director Lindsay Kimball again.
Thank you, City Manager Freitag. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and councilors. Once again, Lindsay Kimball, your Economic Development Director. Tonight, the team is pleased to present to you an overview of Westminster Station, Transportation-Oriented Development Area, TOD, a gateway to our city, a recipient of significant public investment, currently our only light rail connection, and an area of change, ripe for redevelopment and adaptive reuse. It's also an area that, we believe, I like to describe it as potential energy, that in the scientific term of potential energy, the spring ready to spring and the archer pulling back the bow, there is so much potential right now, and it really is at that simmering, getting to a boiling point of things happening, speaking with our private partners from the private sector who are looking to invest in this area. Really exciting things going on in arts and culture in the area as well. So we have a lot of really, really exciting things to share with you tonight. We are at a point, and we're going to walk through tonight the story of how we got here, how we plan for a vibrant TOD area and neighborhood, and what developments are on the horizon, and where we go from here. So I have with me tonight in the audience John Burke behind me, our Manager of Economic Vibrancy, Heather Cronenberg, Real Estate and Development Administrator, and Stephanie Ashman, Senior Planner, and other folks as well, partners from Community Development, John McConnell and Dave Downing, Director Downing, as well here tonight. We also have some private sector partners here tonight that wanted to show their support. We have Don Rozier from Sherman & Associates, and we'll be speaking about his new project that's coming on board. We would like to say thank you to Chris Weatherman, who is watching us via webcast tonight. He couldn't be here, but he is watching us live, and he is with another development group, Diverse Blue, and we'll talk about their project. And also here with us in spirit, and you will see in the video, is Kevin Klock, who is the owner, CEO of Colorado Sound, which is a really, really amazing company and gem that we have in our community. I also want to say thank you for being in person to Michael Eisenstein and Benji Brackman, who are here representing local property interests in the TOD area as well. So experienced developers and investors in the area. I want to say thank you to them for being here. At the end of our presentation, we do have a brief video that was put together by Kevin, as I said, Kevin Klock with Colorado Sound, to promote the arts and community of Westminster Station in the TOD area. Again, we kindly ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation and the video. And with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie Ashman.
Thank you very much. So as you all remember, we came before City Council in December of last year where we briefly discussed the station area. And tonight we're going to get into a little bit more detail on that. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of history. The Westminster Station Area Plan, I'll refer to as the plan, I'll refer to the area as the station area, was adopted in May of 2017 with intensive planning and outreach efforts beginning back in 2012. The location for this station area was advantageously selected for its proximity to US 36 and Federal Boulevard. It's also located just south of key civic and historic landmarks in the city, including Irving Street Library, 73rd Avenue, and the historic Despain Building. The boundaries are 72nd Avenue to the north, Lowell Boulevard to the west, Federal Boulevard to the east, and Little Dry Creek Park to the south. And that diagonal line running through is the rail line, commuter rail. It's the last stop. The plan guides new development within the station area by establishing zoning, design vision, the intended character, and the development regulations that shape and implement the community's vision for the station area. As shown on this slide here, there are 3 different colors that represent characters of development intensity with a mix of uses intended to occur throughout. The orange that you see there marked as number 1 is the commercial mixed use character area. And this classification requires a mix of higher intensity commercial uses, either vertically integrated into a building or built as a standalone commercial use on the site. Residential is also an allowed use in this location if a percent of commercial on the ground floor is met. We can go to 2 to 5 stories in building height in this location. Next, we have the station core. That's the red area and shown as number 2 on the map here. This is considered to be the vibrant activity center. It's planned to be a visual gateway to the RTD commuter rail platform. The South Gateway, as you travel north on Federal and you make your way into our city. And a civic connecting spine to and from the civic facilities to the north. In this location, we can go from 3 stories minimum to 8 stories maximum. You can have 2 stories allowed along Federal Boulevard in this location as well. The third area, which is that purple area indicated as 3 on the map, is a transitional mixed use area indicated in purple, sorry. The classification encourages a unique mix of residential and commercial uses within the neighborhood scale. The use factors fosters a diverse commercial environment that accommodates flexible, creative workforce spaces for a wide range of businesses. These spaces may include office uses, art studios, consulting spaces, as well as flexible storefront units for a range of soft industrial uses such as baking and food production, coffee roasting and distribution, small-scale print shops, restaurants and cafes, and personal services. This character area is called transitional because the intensity of building height reduces as it transitions to Lowell and was highly influenced by the community wanting to ensure that the design fit within the context of the surrounding community. So you have a maximum of 3 stories within that area. The overall design intention for the Westminster Station specific area was to promote a transit-oriented, multimodal development with a high-intensity mix of uses with a focus on community character, a mix of incomes and housing options, with retention and adaptability of existing land uses that will act as a major activity center and economic driver in the historic portion of our city. Next slide. I'll just say that to myself. All right. So to set the stage to achieve the beautiful outcome our residents currently enjoy, a lot of partnerships had to occur. So they're listed here along with $80 million in CIP projects. Our surrounding partners felt strongly about investing in the future of the area and how it would directly benefit their interests as well, not just the city of Westminster. It should be mentioned, along with all these, the list of what some of these CIP projects are, that our nature playground just got awarded the Infrastructure Construction Excellence Award by the Colorado Contractors Association. So that's one of the gems that we have in that area. As you can see in some of these images, it's the Little Dry Creek Park, the platform itself, some of the artwork in the panels where you can pick up the train, and the regional detention facility. Next slide, please, Stephanie. Okay. So the station area has seen an uptick in its creative arts and culture businesses, including the Bachata Dance Studio, Cabin House LLC, which is a photography and videography studio. Colorado Sound continues to thrive within the station area, and Duke's Auto has expressed interest and taken steps to hold various gathering events at their location. So if you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as we said, we have a video from Colorado Sound, but we wanted to specifically share with you, we've had several conversations with them in just the past few weeks, over time, where they're actually looking to expand now into the building that the city owned. It's 3050 71st Street Avenue there, excuse me. So we wanted to let you know that we're working with them on that expansion and helping to support them. So stay tuned. We're still early in the conversation there. We're doing some cost estimates, and we'll be back with more information on that. The other thing we wanted to point out on the slide was Babe Walls. They are excited to come back and do a 2023 event in our community, which we are very excited about. Those murals down there just have done wonders. It sends a very clear signal. This is a creative community, it's a welcoming community. We love the arts in this community, so we want to continue to support that, and we will be supporting a mural actually on that 3050 building that we own. So we'll be supporting that, and potentially we're exploring some other areas, maybe in the station, in the tunnel area there, putting some artwork in that tunnel where you would walk through under to the park area. So a lot of excitement going on, and we also just wanted to tell you about that. We do want to be clear. I know a lot of you already know, and there was some email traffic about, unfortunately, Medusa Collective will be shuttering at the end of this month, and they've been amazing, and they still are going to be supportive of the Babe Walls, and have told us that we've reached out to them and that they want to continue to be part of our art scene here in Westminster. It just, the business model wasn't working out right now, but we're happy to have them back when we have another art festival or something like that. So we're maintaining that relationship, of course, with them. They're wonderful artists, the Artist Collective there, but we just wanted to share that as well. And Food Truck Park, we sent a note in your city notes to be transparent as well. They did terminate their lease there. We still have that pizza slice on the map there because there is really some great infrastructure there to do an event. We had the Catamounts there last year doing live theater, but we have the infrastructure in there, just it's ready to pull up food trucks again and go ahead and start serving, or maybe something that Colorado Sound, where we're also talking to them about expanding perhaps a community stage area in the land that we own behind, where they've got that wall, if you're familiar, they have a wall, maybe helping the sight line there so we can make that a stage, or, and then they could also use from time to time that food truck with different operators. So, it's still in progress, and we're gonna talk to you now a little bit more about some of those developments that will support that arts and culture.
So to get into the residential uses that are existing within the area, that's what this slide demonstrates. So the lighter yellow that you see represents the single-family detached homes that are existing. So it's reading a little yellow for both of them, but the darker yellow, or the darker orange, represents the existing multifamily that's on site. The numbers up here also represent the existing total residential units within the boundary, the new units that would be allowed, and the total of the existing and the new that could be built at final build out. And the development of new residential is key within the station area to bring the vision to fruition. Some new units may include townhomes, live-work units, multifamily apartments, condominiums, and a mix of ownership and rental, both market rate, attainable, and workforce. And Maker Housing's vision for the existing developments is to rehabilitate or replace older housing stock. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the rest.
Thank you. Okay, absolutely. As Lindsay mentioned earlier, we wanted to focus a bit on 3 developments in various stages in this area. And some of the property owners are here tonight, which we're happy about that. So the first one is the Ivy, and that's the garage wrap project that you guys are all probably familiar with. That one has been in the works for a number of years now, and it's planned for 147 units, and 9,000 square feet of retail. They are hoping to break ground soon, but are working on some last minute items and issues that have come up. But it's exciting. Their ODP, all of the development agreements, of course, have been approved previously. The next one is Westminster Station Apartments. That is 75 units of residential. That ODP has already been approved as well. And we've got local, property owners that are here that are supportive of trying to make something happen in this area and contribute to redevelopment. So we're excited about that. And then the last one is the one in red. It's owned by Sherman and Associates. They purchased that property in 2017 and have had a number of designs that they've worked on throughout the years. They're still in process of working through redesign and some numbers on that parcel. But we have someone here as well that Lindsay mentioned that's showing their support for that project. So it's exciting. As we mentioned, there's one already in the works that's about to break ground, and then the other two that are in various processes but are hoping to move forward shortly and bring a lot more activity to that area. Property owners and more residential users to support the retail environment that we're also trying to foster as well.
Okay, and just wrapping up, we wanted to share an overview of some of what we see are challenges and opportunities with the sites within the TOD area. So number one, pretty common with any redevelopment area or project is fragmented ownership. And it's very different from the area, frankly, where we have the other specific plan, which is downtown. That single ownership, you can see, has allowed us a great deal of ability to expedite projects, to have things consistently moving through a similar process and similar vision. There is a vision, for sure, for the TOD area and the specific plan that Stephanie Ashman spoke to. But it's a little more challenging because there is not one single owner that you're dealing with. And in real estate deals, I think Heather would agree with me that ownership is key. So we have to be a little more creative in how we work with people and how we build partnerships and how we get everybody rowing in the same direction for this area of our community. So some of the challenges, very similar to most redevelopment areas, unfortunately has seen disinvestment over the years. Also obsolete structures. So what we mean by that is, some of the warehousing in there or light industrial flex, the ceiling heights are low. Most standard flex or industrial is going to have 30-foot clear heights. They're going to require certain ability to make truck turns, and everything's a little tighter because it's an older area of a community. Things have just changed how those industrial areas have been developed. So there's different reasons why an owner would not be putting more money into a structure that might be challenging to lease. Of course, unfortunately, safety concerns, whether real or perceived, are there. And there is a problem that a lot of business owners have called us on to help, and our friends in PRL have been amazing, and PD, to help us with some of the issues associated with people experiencing homelessness and some of those camps that pop up, unfortunately, around the train station and the train station. So working with our partners at RTD and CSX and everyone to try and get that cleaned up. Also, it's an incremental approach. So part of the positives are that we can work with, and we already have set the vision, set the plan for this area. There was a lot of buy-in for that development of the specific plan. Certainly the train station, the park, everything has been such an amazing investment by not just the city, but many, many partners. So all told, there's been about $80 million of investment from the public sector in this area, in this train station, park, the parking garage, the streets, improvements to sidewalks, lighting. So many things have gone into improvements in this area and surrounding it. The nature play park, the dog park, amazing assets that we have there. So we have really laid the groundwork. We've got the tinder is all there. Where the spark that we are trying to help ignite is the private sector investments. We have definitely done a wonderful job of laying the groundwork. I think we're in the position now in our redevelopment where we need to really get connected to our private sector partners, and we are so honored that a lot of them are here tonight with us. We are trying to strengthen continuously those relationships because that's what's going to move the needle now. I think we have done a lot in the community, and frankly, we walked the Westminster train station on Thursday. A lot of the team that's here from the city and Mr. Eisenstein and Mr. Brackman, pardon me, We walked the entire station, and we walked all the way down to the dog park and around and looped around, got all our steps in. But really, that's what you have to do to understand what an amazing investment that was. And you really just wonder, like, wow, this is something that the private sector recognizes and really wants to leverage, especially that train station. That's very important, especially for next generation of folks who are looking to buy condos or townhomes, or, you know, people starting out and looking for a place to rent in our community. So that's really the potential there. But we've got some challenges, and as I said, you know, we've got to think differently about the redevelopment in this area. Heather is leading the charge to work on the redevelopment and adaptive reuse toolkit that we're going to be bringing back to you and updating you on. We've got our consultant underway. We are very much making that informed by the private sector, because we want them to be able to use the toolkit. But I will plant a seed with you now that there's a lot of things that we need to think about differently in redevelopment versus greenfield development. A lot of our structures and fees and ways we assess things are built on a greenfield model from the 80s or 70s sometimes that are still in our code, and it's really hamstringing development in this area. We've got a lot of examples. That wasn't the purpose here today, but we are going to come back with a lot of those items that we would suggest could be tweaked, sometimes very easily, to be more friendly and encouraging to the private sector developers who are really trying to get something done in this area, get some new people, new blood, greater folks in the art scene, and you know, really get something going, because we have a great catalyst. I think now, as we're digging into these actual projects, we are really seeing where the rubber hits the road and have identified some very specific things that I think we can do a little differently that could help unlock a lot of that development potential. So with that, we're really excited about it, and we just have a short video that we'd like to share with you, and then we will take all of your questions and answer everything there. So, Abby? Okay. Yep. You ready? Good. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the Music and Entertainment District at Westminster Station. Artists have been creating with Colorado Sound Studios for over 40 years.
All of us here at Colorado Sound Studios really believe music enriches lives and brings communities together.
We have built a home for world-class music professionals, and our vision is to expand the music culture we have created into our surrounding community. Our vision is to create a neighborhood where creative industries thrive, where musicians find their voice, where audiences enjoy great shows and art.
We envision a vibrant neighborhood full of music, arts, culture, dining, great transportation between here and Denver, along with the great support of the City of Westminster and Maker Housing Partners.
With just an 11-minute light rail ride from downtown Denver and accessibility from I-70, I-25, and the Boulder Turnpike, families from across the Front Range can conveniently enjoy the 40-acre park and open space, and enjoy an evening of dining and entertainment. Featuring multiple acres of mixed-use land focused around the Colorado Sound Studios venue and education center, we are at the heart of this creative economic cluster. The district is a music-centric gathering place to cultivate talent, build community, and provide economic opportunity.
Another step towards the district is working with the visionary team of Zocalo Development. They are forging the way and bringing forth a vibrant and innovative mixed-use development based around a music and arts venue. Through the inspiring designs of Chris Wyman and his team at Simple Brown, Zocalo will be breaking ground on the east side of Federal, directly across the existing studio complex on West 71st Avenue. We look forward to continued collaboration with the City of Westminster and Adams County as we turn the district into reality.
We invite you to join us in this creative vision where art and business flourish together.
My track's becoming superhuman. Nobody else knows how to do it. Knock me down, I'll tell you, I don't care. You see, I'll tell you now that I ain't gonna get outworked. Right now I'm 18 and every day I'll write a new verse. Cause this is just who I am. I know that this is God's plan, oh yeah. I know that I'll get there one day, yeah, yeah.
Great, thank you, and I just want to add, I should have said this before we played the video, but you'll notice there were a lot of images of Red Rocks there and Colorado Sound there. It's a great point of pride that in our community we have the preferred mobile recording studio artists that work at Red Rocks. So usually if you've seen something that says live from Red Rocks or live at Red Rocks recorded, it was recorded by Colorado Sound. And if you visit their studio, which I'm sure they'd love to have any of you come visit, their walls are lined with all the albums that they've produced there. A lot of really famous people over the 30, 40 years that they've been here and been in Westminster. And of course, the Zocalo project that he referenced is across Federal, so just outside of the TOD area. But you know what? The point of the TOD was that it spurs and is a catalyst for much more. So we are excited to work with Zocalo and explore that project with them. That really would be I know you haven't had a full presentation on it, but it's an arts-centered, focused community. So different residential units, duplexes, single-family, townhomes for sale, and then built into that is this Colorado Sound pavilion that you saw, that the renderings of, where there's a school of music in there, there's a stage, there's a restaurant, there's gathering places and places throughout the development where people are going to be able to engage in live performances. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of that overview if you're wondering why you kept seeing Red Rocks in there. They do a lot of business there, but they're centered in Westminster. So with that, myself and the team are happy to take any questions.
Councilor Novella?
Well, this is really exciting. It's sort of a renaissance for Federal and for this area. And yes, this is one of the first things I did when I got to the city was work on Westminster Station with John Burke. And so this has been a really long time coming to see this vision evolve and to see some of these efforts really start to come to fruition. And so I'm so excited. One of the things that when I was first talking to developers, really when we were while we were trying to figure out what do we do with this area, developers said, well, we don't really, we're not so sure about Federal, and the market's not really there, and we really need to see city investment and predictability. And that is exactly what we've done. Seeded that. The predictability is within the station area plan. We've zoned it. It's an adopted plan, so everybody kind of knows what their neighbors are going to do. And we've invested time and energy and intention into this area. And so this is what we're starting to see. And we're starting to see also just the external market starting to catch up with this area. When we were first looking at how numbers might pan out for development here, it was pretty low for market rents, and but now we're starting to see that come together for Westminster Station. So I love that we have projects coming in. And I'll just say it takes, Rhino's still going. It started well over 20 years ago in terms of getting that area generated. I lived in Jack London Square in Oakland, and when that was really at its initial building point, where the retail there just didn't have enough people to survive. And so, but now, like 10, 15, 20 years later, the retail is now surviving well. And I think that that'll be key for us to be patient with the retail component here. We have to get the bodies, people living there. We have to get the destinations going. So I think it's a great synergy with the district. So I don't have, other than just being really excited, I don't have too many questions. I just had one with the projects that are coming in. Are they entering into our GID? Is that something that's expanding?
The Ivy is, yes, I think.
Yeah,
They will be. I just haven't, I'm sorry, I'm still new a bit. So then the other two, we haven't gotten to that point, I don't believe, but Stephanie, you know.
So 3551, which is Westminster Station, it's over towards Lowell. Westminster Station Apartments have just kind of settled on their name. Since they don't have a commercial component and they are parking wholly on their site, all residential, they will not be part of the GID. Sherman already is part of the GID, and the Lux Living property, the city property, was all brought in as part of the GID at that time when it was created.
Okay. Well, hopefully, as we, if we're at all involved, I think financially or in assisting projects, I would hope that we would have GID be part of our development agreement. Because, even with the garage wrap, there is going to be retail that would, and some property tax generation. So, okay, thanks.
Pro Tem?
Couple of quick questions. On the food truck park, and knowing that is going away, but there was improvements done on that parcel, and I know that in the staff notes you said that you will be looking for alternative uses of that. Are we going to make sure that that's maintained as is? Because I think food truck, that's not really, it's an interesting concept because they're having other food truck owners who go there. So they have to imagine there's still potential through the summer months to allow them to potentially use that space since it's set up for it.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And that's one of the things, we are still maintaining that landscaping, making sure there's still, everything is in good order, a good working order for them just to come in, plug and play, hook up, and have a food truck rally again. Certainly we've talked about it for special events. For example, as I said, last year we did the Catamounts, which were a traveling theater group who did Shakespeare in the Park. So we're looking at doing, with PRL and the Arts and Cultural Group, looking at other opportunities for that. Every year, Colorado Sound also does a quote-unquote block party, where they bring in pretty substantial musicians to come in and play. There's no charge for that block party, but that would be another opportunity that we've talked about, bringing in some independent food trucks. So I think it's great that we have the infrastructure there. And we're able to continue to utilize it. It is city property. We own that, so we can continue to use that.
Great. That kind of goes into some of my other thoughts, questions. Is prior to the pandemic, we were doing some pretty neat events down there, and I know that after the pandemic and years since, we haven't. We're just now starting to kind of get back to that. And my understanding of some of those events, and obviously, staff has very much changed in your department since that time, was to create a buzz, was, the understanding. So like, I've always been a big advocate since they started talking about, you know, it being a music district, just because I like music, and Colorado has a great music scene, and being able to capitalize on that, I think, makes sense. So, you know, one of the things with the station park specifically, my understanding is, I mean, it's kind of set up to do
Yes.
concerts and stuff. So is that a potential partnership that the city's looking at for our concerts in the summer, to work with Colorado Sound to utilize that space?
Yes, absolutely, at the station area. So for others, if you're not familiar, there was built into the station, around the tunnel there, a stage, so you could do live performances. And I think, before COVID, there were some great festivals that happened there. I think I don't know the proper name, the Latin American Festival was held there. We have some beautiful pictures from that event, and other community gathering opportunities, and different food festivals or music festivals. But it would absolutely be a great location for that. It was built for that.
Great.
Yeah.
The only other thing I was kind of curious about, you, and maybe this is too early to ask, but you had mentioned about potentially Colorado Sound expanding into some of that city-owned property. I know that there's been a variety of conversations in my time where some of the property, the way that we lay things out, was because we figured streets were going to go a certain way, our infrastructure was going to go a certain way. Is some of that kind of evolving? You know, and is that going to be part of those discussions probably that are forthcoming?
Yes, we need to work on that, because we do know that I think there's a street platted right through their building, right, Steph?
I'm always careful about how I ask, because I don't remember what kind of meeting I heard.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
It's a driveway.
There's platted right of way in that area, but I think how we're looking at the development of the station area, it's, you know, it's gonna be organic to a certain extent, because you do have fragmented ownership. And, you know, depending on how this music center, you know, manifests in that area, you know, we've looked at, okay, maybe that becomes more of a pedestrian connection, right? Not necessarily a road connection. Doesn't rule out the road connection entirely, right? So we have to just keep these different scenarios open for the future planning of what that could be, based on when land becomes developable or, you know, ripe for redevelopment.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the only other thing that I wanted to, you probably don't have an answer for this, because I didn't realize the amount of stuff on the Adams County side of Federal that's getting built out. I have to imagine figuring out how we connect our residents and their residents across Federal safely. It's gotta be something at least on our mind, because, I mean, it would make sense for people to be able to get back and forth, but that's also a very dangerous street. So, but I appreciate the presentation. It's nice to hear that there's the buzz is starting to kind of reignite. I know even you brought up Duke's Garage. There was a event I went to down there. Gosh, I want to say maybe 2019. There was I think it was called Girl Garage, and there was a female mechanic who came and did a talk, who sold her book and stuff. My daughter loved it, but I know they weren't able to kind of get that going. But my understanding was they continued to, Duke's Garage kept talking with that mechanic. So, in short, excited to see that there's some buzz starting to reignite.
Anyone else?
No one else is as jazzed as we are.
Just me and you. That's it.
My video game.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
We're not jazzed, we're just like.
My big thing is, yes, we have to be real, the train comes once an hour.
Yeah.
And that may be all we get, because we're the end of the line. And we have built a lot in this city at 3 stations, and we have 1. So that's reality, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, they're talking 40, 44, and later, even if this other stuff happens with the Front Range Rail. So that's real. It's once an hour. I can't take it anymore to get to meetings downtown, because I either have to be there 45 minutes early and don't really feel like at 7 in the morning standing outside, fiddling my fingers, waiting for doors to open. So that's just real. So as things get built, they will need parking spots, because don't assume, because there's not a big presence of, it isn't like downtown where we have 500 buses. We don't there. So I just want us to be real about what's there, and it may be all we ever have. The safety and homelessness down there are real. I heard people that tried to go to the truck things in evening and just didn't feel safe. So we've got a lot of work to do down there. The homeless situation, that's our worst in that area. And that's a real situation. We can't gloss over it. Has to be taken care of. We have to get it cleaned up and figure it all out. But the train is the biggest thing. It's a great station, but it comes once an hour, and that's real. That's fact. That's it.
That's all we got, Mayor.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.